We have often heard of Mormon insiders speaking out about the things they've learned while they were inside the LDS Church. To my knowledge, I do not recall having heard a Mormon insider who actually worked as part and parcel of the Strengthening Church Members Committee speak out. But that's what we have in store for you tonight on Mormonism Live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Mormonism Live. Radio Free Mormon here, and there's Bill Reel over there. How are you doing, Mr. Reel?
I'm doing great, RFM. How are you?
Great. Thank you. We have the wonderful guest. I talked about it in the opening, and I want to get right to that, but I don't want to skip any important announcements along the way. Do you have any announcements?
Yeah, I'll just say, folks, we really need donations, and we hate to say it, but it has to happen every so often. Over the last month or so, sort of plateaued just a little bit again. So, folks, if I can just encourage, if anybody out there can support the show, please go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, and $5 a month, $10 a month, nothing big. We're not asking for 10% of your gross, not even your net surplus or interest, but just a small little donation every month would help us continue this great show. And we appreciate everybody who does support the program. Thank you for joining us tonight on Mormonism Live.
Thanks for that announcement, Bill. I appreciate it. All right. So can we bring on to the stage our special guest, Caitlin Whitaker?
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad that you guys have let me be on the show. This is my first time ever talking about my experiences on somebody else's platform. So this is a really big deal for me. It took 5 years for me to feel brave enough to talk about it. So thanks for having me. This is really special for me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and telling your story. Now, I want to let the audience know that during the period, basically 5 years, a little over 5 years, between 2015 and 2020, I believe it is, that you worked as an employee for the LDS Church. And you worked there in different capacities, in different divisions during that time. And frankly, you were promoted rapidly, I think, because the supervisors could see that you were extremely competent and good at what you did. So you're that kind of story, that Horatio Alger story, but you end up getting yourself promoted up into the administration of the SCMC, which we'll get to. But first, I want to talk to you about before your church employment and then maybe after your church employment. And in the middle, we'll talk about the church employment. Can you tell us about growing up? Did you grow up as a Mormon?
Yes, I did. I grew up very, very traditional Mormon, probably even stricter than some other people. Like, for example, my family, our bishop told us to bury our weapons of war, and we literally smashed up our Lord of the Rings DVDs because they glorified violence, and we buried them in the backyard. So, like, my Mormonism experience was even more strict than, like, regular Mormonism.
Okay, that's pretty extreme.
Yeah, so we were like very letter of the law, very obedient. I drank caffeine, but like besides that, like we were very, very strict about being like perfect Mormons. That was my experience growing up.
Mm-hmm. And so as a result of that, by the way, go ahead and share any stories that you want along the way, because I don't mean to hurry you past this.
No,
All right?
totally fine.
Okay, but I understand you're growing up very, very Orthodox in an Orthodox household with the caffeine cola exception, perhaps. But
Yeah.
other than that, you're smashing up, Lord of the Rings DVDs and burying them in the backyard. That's
Yeah.
one I'd never heard of before, by the way.
Yeah, our bishop, he wasn't very clear about it in his announcement over the pulpit, but he was trying to get people to stop watching porn. But you can't really say that over the pulpit in front of kids. So he was just like, I need you all to evaluate your media and smash up and bury your weapons of war. I don't think maybe he did say to actually bury them. I don't remember. But we took it very literally. And since we didn't really have that many inappropriate movies, we were just like going through with a fine-tooth comb. Like we smashed up like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man DVDs, like
heresy.
It was wild, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and
By
I
the
think
way,
our
for those,
bishop was really surprised when we told him because he was kind of like, "Oh, I kind of meant like rated R movies and like really like the more extreme stuff, but we wanted to be obedient, and that was just what my family did."
I
So,
will tell you, it's a manifestation of your righteousness, Mormon style. I had some friends who, after Lynn Bryson, I think is his name, came to the stake and gave his presentation about rock and roll music and Satanism and the backmasking and everything. Then I had friends, a gal and her brother, who went home and they took all their rock and roll records out to the backyard and did the same thing.
tragic. That's so expensive. We smashed up the trilogy, like the extended
The
edition, you
extended
know?
version.
Yeah, I was really bummed. Lord of the Rings was my favorite movie at the time. The third one was my favorite one. So,
Yeah, the one with all the special features and everything.
yeah, exactly.
That's funny. What he meant to say was he wanted you to go and bury your weapons of love for peace. That was what it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're very righteous, very observant. I'll say that. And you end up wanting to go on a mission. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was kind of, we were all kind of taught, at least women are taught, that like marriage is the most important thing. So I was at college expecting to get married. I didn't get married, and I was so old. I was 19 and I hadn't gotten married. So I was feeling really lost. I don't actually think I was old, but like at the time I was like, wow, like my mom got married at 18, my other relatives got married at 18. So I was just feeling kind of like lost. I didn't know like what my next step was going to be in my life. And that's when President Monson made the announcement for the age change, and I was like, wow, this is the answer. Like I'm going to go on a mission. That's my next step.
And for the audience, that's 2012, correct?
I believe so. I think I was on my mission from 2013 to 2014, and I think the announcement was made in 2012. Yeah,
Okay,
October of 2012.
so we can understand that you're 19, you're an old maid. Only in Mormonism is
I
a girl an
know.
old maid at 19.
Yeah.
So, but you decided to go on a mission. Was there a reason that you decided to go on a mission as opposed to still going to school? By the way, I immediately had made the assumption when we first spoke that the school you were talking about was BYU, but that's not true, is it?
No, I was accepted into BYU, and I kind of had like this moment of rebellion as a teenager, and my big moment of rebellion was deciding not to accept my BYU acceptance. I rejected it and I went to UVU instead. Um, so that's how I ended up at UVU. I sorry, what was your question, Bill?
My
Or
question was that you've achieved the ripe old age of 19, you're not married, and now you're thinking, I'm going to go on a mission. And I was asking, why did you go for a mission instead of just continuing your
oh,
schooling?
oh. So school for me, I didn't have any examples really of people in my life who were women who had careers. So I like the whole purpose of going to school was to get married. At least that's how I was taught. That was my family culture and tradition is the school thing isn't really real. Like that's not really why you're there. You're there to get married. And so I think I thought that if I went on a mission, I could like spiritually prepare myself to get married. It was like what God wanted for me. It was a more righteous decision than going to school because going to school is kind of worldly, crazy. It's kind of worldly. um, so that was kind of my reasoning. And I also wanted to kind of repent of like some really, really small things that I had done as a teenager. Like nothing even like discipline worthy or anything. Like I just felt like very impure and unworthy. So I was like, if I go on a mission, like that'll make up for everything. It'll be a fresh start to my life. And that's kind of why I decided to go.
We sure can get guilted into doing a lot of stuff as Mormons, can't we?
I know, 18 months of my life gone.
Yeah, but I'm sure you did a great job as a missionary. So you went to the MTC, and tell us anything about that, and then ultimately you'll tell us the story about the visa and the waiting for it.
So I go to the MTC, and it was a pretty good experience for me. I was really, really thrilled to be on a mission. Um, And I ended up finding out that I couldn't go straight to Argentina. I actually had to wait for a visa. And I got my like new mission call in the MTC, and they just said they were sending me to the Washington, D.C. South Mission. And that's where I ended up waiting for my visa for only 2 or 3 months, but it was still a very impactful thing for me. In the 2 or 3 months that I was in that mission stateside, I actually ran into a lot of immigrants because I was Spanish speaking. So they assigned us to Spanish speaking branches and Spanish
Right.
speaking boards. And I grew up very, very right wing Republican. I believed everything that I was told about immigrants, even kind of the lies and kind of the bigoted things people say. And that was the first time that on my mission was the first time I realized I had been lied to my whole life about immigration. Because I was meeting people who, their husbands had been ripped away from them, their kids, and so like a mom and her kids would be left behind, and the dad got deported back to his country. And I just remember thinking, like, this is not right. And that's the opposite of what I've been taught by my family and by politicians, and like kind of that worldview I had grown up with was wrong. And I had a decision to make, like, was I going to continue believing that immigration is bad and that we need to get all of these illegals out, or I could soften my heart and say, no, actually this isn't right, like the way we treat immigrants is not okay. And I softened my heart in the direction of, I think we need to be more compassionate to people. And that really was the first time I realized maybe everything my family had taught me wasn't true, because I had experienced it for myself. I
Mhm.
saw a mother sobbing as the members of the ward gathered around her and hugged her. Like, how does that not touch you? How does that not change your mind? So that was a really RFM asked me like a couple days ago, like, what good thing I got out of my mission, and I think that was one of the only good things I got was having kind of that perspective shift.
You started to sort of enter a stage of critically thinking and being open sort of to the narrative you were given, not holding up. It's sort of the
Exactly.
seeds of that. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
really
just the
cool.
very, very beginning seeds, because
Mhm.
I continued on my trajectory of being like very Mormon, but it
Yeah.
was the
Right.
beginning. My mission was the beginning for sure. Um,
Isn't that
and
interesting, though? Isn't that interesting? And I know it's going to continue, but that a person like yourself, who's accomplished, intelligent, very competent, as we're going to find out, um, should have the first tremors of your testimony being shaken by your mission.
Isn't that interesting? And I've talked to so many people who have had that same experience where they said, "Oh, it was my mission. That's where I started doubting." And I'm like, I just think that's fascinating, because I think the church changed the missionary age in an attempt to secure members and to keep them in the church. But I would say I know more missionaries who have left at this point that are around my age than missionaries who have stayed. I mean, and part of that is because I'm in the ex-Mormon community, right? I'm not as involved anymore in Mormon communities at all. But I have noticed that trend. Like, there are so many people I know who went on missions, and that changed everything for them.
So eventually, then you got your visa,
Yes.
which doesn't sound like it
I
was organized very well. Maybe there were some bureaucratic delays or something in getting the visas approved, but you got it. And then you went to Venezuela, Argentina.
Argentina. Yeah. Don't
I
cry
have
for
been
me,
mixing up Venezuela with Argentina consistently as we've been talking prior to the show. And I did it again. And I knew it was Argentina, but I said Venezuela anyway.
No, that's okay. So yeah, I did. I ended up going to Argentina, um, and it was a very, very difficult experience. And I don't think I ever sugarcoated that. Even when I got home, I told people, like, I wouldn't go back. I said, even if God showed up and told me to go back, no way. And the thing that was so interesting to me while I was there is I got to this point where I asked myself, is this country better for me having been in Argentina? Like, as I was leaving Argentina after I'd spent like over a year there, I remember leaving and looking around at the people, and I asked myself, are these people better off? because that's what I was always told, is that if you go on a mission, you're going to change lives. And I was a good missionary. I was obedient. I put in a lot of work. And when I sat down with myself, if nobody else was around, if it was just me and my quiet little voice, if I'd asked myself, like, do you think you made a difference? The answer was no. And I knew that. Like, I knew that what I had done amounted to nothing. Like, I was sharing the gospel and sharing the Book of Mormon with people who had dirt floors, didn't have a lot of food, didn't have running water. And this was in the more rural parts of Argentina. I don't want to make it sound like a third world country, because it's not, for the most part. But in some of the areas I served, that's who I was talking to. And I remember just thinking, like, do these people need the Book of Mormon, or do they need food? Do they need infrastructure? Like, I don't think that what I'm giving them is useful or helpful at all. And so I had a lot of like this cognitive dissonance, because on one hand, I knew that what I had been doing wasn't helping and didn't make a difference for the people there. But on the other hand, I was told my whole life that the church is true. So instead of like reconciling that at the time, and realizing that the message is garbage, because it's useless. Sorry to anybody that offends, but the message really isn't very helpful. And instead of me realizing that, I decided that it was the messenger. It was me. I was garbage. I was the unhelpful one. It was my fault that nobody's lives had been changed, because I could see it. I could see that I hadn't made any progress. The country was not different for me having been there. But I wasn't ready to accept that it was because the gospel, the message is garbage. Again, the messenger was garbage. And that weighed really heavily on me. Just because I was like, well, I must have just not been doing something right. Like, if I had worked harder, if I had done something, I would have seen a difference, because that's what they've always promised, is that you would see a difference in people's lives, and that the country would be changed, you know? So I don't know if you're ready for me to segue into this next part, but
Whenever you're ready.
I should ask them. Somebody's
Yeah.
asking, where in Argentina did you serve? They wanted, like, maybe they served there too or something. They were sort of curious what part of Argentina you served in.
So I was in Entre Rios, La Paz. I could look through my mission journal, but I was in
I've heard of
Rosario.
La Paz.
Rosario, Argentina, and I served in Entre Rios, and I think La Paz was part of Entre Rios, and I was in the city for a couple of transfers, but even then, the message I was sharing, I was like, these people don't need this. Like, what? They don't need Jesus the way that I think they do. So yeah, if that answers that question.
You know, for a person to feel that way, if we could just stop for a second before we go on, it would seem that you would have had to have come to a point where you don't really think the LDS Church is the one and only true church on the face of the earth that has the ordinances necessary to receive her exaltation. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I don't think that I had quite reached that point on my mission, but that is a fair thing to say.
Yeah. Sometimes we don't realize things till we hear somebody else say them, and then we go, oh, that's what I've been feeling.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But yeah, it just seems that, you know, there's a struggle going on.
To be fair, my companions really pushed for baptisms, and I didn't, because I would sit down with people and I could just tell that they didn't really get what the church was about, and I wasn't about to push somebody into a baptism when I didn't think that they actually knew what they were getting themselves into. But my companions pushed really hard, so I only had like 3 or 4 baptisms on my mission, and all of them were my companions pushing for it. But I couldn't bring myself to push it, because I was like, and you would think, right, kind of like you're saying, RFM, if I believed that this was like the one true way for salvation, that I would have been pushing it way harder. But I honestly wanted people to understand what the church was before committing, and I didn't feel like anybody that I taught really understood that. There was one 9-year-old that we taught who had, like, her whole family was Mormon, And that I was like, okay, like she'll have the support system. She wants to do this. Like she was reading the Book of Mormon and I felt good about that one just because I was like, okay, like her whole family is in it already. Like this is fine. But everyone else that we pushed into it, it did not, I felt nothing. If I'm being honest, I was like, wow, we're making these people get baptized for what? They don't even know what they're doing, you know? So yeah, just an interesting perspective that you brought up.
I'm reminded of it from Thrive here in Southern Utah this past week, but Nemo gave a presentation and he showed sort of the deceptions that he had laid out and wanted his bishopric and then his stake president and then area authorities and then general authorities to answer, because they kept kicking the questions up the line because they couldn't answer them. But one of the points they made was something you're pointing to, which is Elder Ballard making this comment that he doesn't know where people got the idea, where the missionaries got the idea about inviting in potential converts, investigators, to baptism in the first discussion. Meanwhile, I think the original gospel discussion, the missionary discussions from 1974, and then I think the next one in 19 whatever it was, 80 something, and then even in 2000, Ballard, I think, is a part of all of that. And meanwhile, it's there. He is at the head of sort of the committee that does that. And so it seems so dishonest to push people right away. And it seems dishonest to deny that you're one of the people who wanted to push people right away. Anyway, I think it's highly manipulative to take people and immediately try to push on them some sort of spiritual experience and get them to have a testimony of this new thing you're showing them. It's kind of like the used car salesman who's like, hey, get in, let's go for a ride. What do you think? What do you want your payment to be? And next thing you know, you're buying a car you don't want.
Yeah. And that's honestly how it felt, is just, I felt like I wasn't actually portraying, like, I felt like people weren't walking away with a full understanding of the church and like what the commitment was. And that felt wrong to me. So that's why I didn't have a lot of baptisms, is because I was like, no, I want to make sure they actually know what they're getting into. And part of it too is Argentina has so many inactive members. We had branches with like 500 members on the records. Okay. So part of this trend of just baptizing. And then we would have 4 people in sacrament meeting, like 500 people on the records, 4 people in sacrament meeting. So it's like, I was like, I'm not going to contribute to this problem. Like I only want to have people in it who actually want to be a part of it. I'm not going to push you or try to be your friend. Some missionaries would try to make friends and like really form bonds with people just to baptize them. And that felt wrong to me.
Right.
So
by the end of your mission, did you feel like you had achieved absolution for your sins?
no, because that's the thing in Mormonism, right? You're never done. Perfection is always just one more step away. Always, eternally. So when I was done with my mission, I was like, hey, got to get married, got to do the next steps, and then I'll be happy finally, or then I'll finally feel like I've made it. And if you're ready for me to segue into the next part.
Please.
So I got back from my mission, and again, this feeling weighing on my heart so much that like what I had done didn't amount to anything. 18 months of my life that I had given to the Lord, and I didn't feel like there was anything to show for it. I felt lied to. I felt betrayed. And it was so weird because like you could tell someone you went on a mission, right? Like in your ward, and they'd be so happy for you. They'd be like, wow, good for you. You changed lives. And like they're trying to be supportive, but like inside I was like, I didn't do anything. Like I every single day I was like a hamster in a wheel basically. And it didn't amount to anything at the end of the day. And I had been promised that it would. Anyway, so I with all these feelings of like I was a crappy messenger, it was my fault that nobody's lives had been changed, I decided to apply for church employment because I still wanted desperately to make a difference and to feel like I was building Zion. So I got a job, and
you lived in the Salt Lake. I'm sorry, you lived in the Salt Lake Valley.
Yes. So this was at church headquarters in Salt Lake City. that was my first job. Was I I was hired as an operator. And what that means is there's a general church number that you can call. I still remember it.
What is it?
It's 801-240-1000. And that is like public information. I hope. We'll see. Maybe you'll get sued for that, but I don't think so.
Hang on,
Everybody
let me
calls
try
it.
this right now here.
We would get like perverts
That's quite
calling
close.
and stuff. But yeah, so that was my first job. I was part-time. I was working. They've moved offices since then, so I feel comfortable saying like it was in the basement of the church administration building. They moved locations after that, but
Is there a fear that someone would be going after the operators?
I just think the church doesn't want people to know exactly where locationally certain departments are, just for safety reasons. There were a lot of weirdos. Like genuinely, I know that people lost sleep wondering where to put certain employees so that they wouldn't be like at risk. We just got a lot of weirdos.
What was the weirdest thing that you know about?
Okay, I'll tell you a couple. So there was a guy who would call us who was kind of, again, a pervert. Like he would literally be on the phone saying like asking us questions, but it was so he could jerk off. I hope that's okay for me to say. And as soon as we realized that's what he was doing, we were just told to hang up. So we would get weirdos like that.
Okay. I understand. Phone calls.
Yes. Phone calls. And as we would ask, like, hey, how can I help you? He'd just ask questions to get us a key. It was dumb. Anyway, so weird stuff like that. And then who was the other one? Okay, so this wasn't until a lot later in my church employment, but I still feel like it's worth talking about because it was very scary for me at the time. The guy who goes by new name Noah in the Exmo community.
Mike Norton.
Yes, Mike Norton. He called me. He found my number and my email, and I think a bishop had given it to him. I don't understand exactly how he got my information, but he was leaving me like pretty threatening voicemails, and I do not like that man. I'm just going to say that. I've been very vocal about that in the past. I think he is not a friend of Mormons or ex-Mormons. I think he makes ex-Mormons look terrible. But he made me feel very threatened, and I was very, very nervous for my safety. So I ended up taking my contact information off of like the ward directory, like in LDS tools or whatever it's called.
So he got a hold of your personal number.
Well, it was my work number, but I didn't want him, it was my work number and my work email.
You have a work number that's different than the main line.
Yes. And he got it's like very specific to me and my work. I actually had to change phone numbers because of it. They gave me a new phone number. But I just remember being so nervous that he was going to post somewhere or ask people to check the directory and see like where I lived. And I don't think that he actually would have done anything, but it was very scary for me just because I'm a woman, and he was like very angry in his phone calls. And it just really rubbed me the wrong way. And even as I've exited Mormonism, I'm like, that's not the way to handle these situations. Like you shouldn't be harassing church employees. I think that's terrible as someone who lived through it. So yeah, so just when I say like, I feel comfortable saying that the operators were in the basement of the cab and they're not anymore. It's just because I know that the church gets worried about safety concerns. So.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You say cab, the church administration building. Is that different from the cob?
Yeah. So the church administration building is like right next to the cob. But yeah, there's two different buildings. And then there's also the West Office building, the WOB, which is kind of funny. So yeah, there's probably more buildings than that, but those were the three I was the most familiar with. Those are like the three main church headquarters buildings.
Okay. So you're there, you're working as an operator, you're fielding the phone calls and you're forwarding them to the appropriate offices?
Yeah, so we would answer the phone and just say like, thank you for calling the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Where can I direct your call? And we would forward calls all over church headquarters, like facilities management, local unit support, donations in kind, HR, LDS Charities. I don't know what the new name for that is. That new name. But anyways, just anything you could imagine that people might be calling about, but they wouldn't have like the specific number for the department. We would just
Okay.
forward them. I even had a directory of all of the apostles and the prophets' phone number, like their cell phones. So I remember like feeling so special at the time, like, ooh, I have access to all this information.
And that's
But
in case a call comes in from someone who merits calling that, or would you call the,
yeah,
what happened? Did you ever use that list?
yeah. So they would call each other. I don't know why they didn't save each other's numbers in their phone, but they would just like, and maybe it's like old habits die hard, right? I'm forgetting that
Yeah.
these men are like in their 90s. So they're probably used to just like a landline where they just like pick up the phone and
They
call.
used to hang the telephone on the wall and talk into the speaker and
Yeah,
hold the
exactly.
receiver up here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they just weren't super familiar with how do I save contact information in a cell phone. And maybe they were, I don't know. I don't want to insult them, but like they would call each other a lot. So they'd call us and we'd be like, "Hey, where can I direct you?" And they're like, "This is Elder Eyring and I'm like and I want to talk to Elder Holland, you know." So I would transfer him over.
Oh, wait,
Um
apostle to apostle
yeah. Yeah.
calling through the operators?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Very interesting. um and yeah, it wasn't a very exciting job to be honest, but like it was fun, and for me, fresh off my mission, I felt like I was actually helping people.
Yeah, you're
Um
accomplishing things.
exactly. Yeah, and it's people who want to be helped. Isn't that crazy? Like when you're on your mission, you're like chasing down people, trying to get them to stop in the street. But like when I'm working for the church, I'm just sitting in a desk and they're calling me and asking for help, which just was a night and day difference for me between my mission and church employment. So I felt very useful. Looking back, I don't think I was very useful, but like at the time, like I genuinely felt like I was helping.
When you got a
Um,
job to do, you got to do it well. And you
yeah,
did.
exactly.
So
So,
how long were you there? And then where'd you get promoted to?
so I was there, I think for 9 months. I want to say it was 9 months that I was working as an operator. And then I realized I wanted to get some full-time work, and they didn't really have full-time jobs for operators. So I realized I'd have to switch departments. So I started applying for jobs, and I was interviewed by the missionary department, which was a very interesting interview. They
So you're
basically
not
told
you're not
me,
applying for a specific job?
I don't remember what the position was. I was basically just looking at what am I qualified to do, and I was just
Yeah.
applying for jobs at the church, like at church headquarters still, but full-time positions.
Okay.
And I interviewed with the missionary department, and they asked me like, "Do you think your testimony can withstand like hearing about all the things missionaries do that are really messed up?" Like it was a very serious interview, I remember. And I remember saying, "Yeah, like I can handle it." And I honestly at the time thought that I would be able to handle something like that. And I don't think I was quite ready for a position like that. So they did not end up hiring me.
Yeah. So we
Um,
talked about this the other day, and I said, how on earth? I mean, what kind of dumb question is that? How would
I
anybody
know.
know if they would be affected by something that they haven't heard yet?
Right. Like they weren't telling me exactly what it was these missionaries were up to. They were just like, "Do you think your testimony could handle this?" And it's like, "Well, it would be helpful to know what you're talking about, but that's another thing."
Yeah. Okay. So you didn't get that job, but you are going to get a different job, right?
Yes. I applied for a job in a place called the Global Service Center. I feel like that's pretty common knowledge, so I'm okay saying that. Like Global Service Center, I was in a place called Local Unit Support. And what that means is local unit. So, like branches, wards, stakes, those are all considered units, right? And we answered questions from bishops, branch presidents, stake presidents, ward clerks, finance clerks, membership clerks, um, policy questions, questions about the software, questions about record keeping. Just to give you a couple quick examples, if somebody so if a ward clerk was counting tithing, but he recorded the tithing amounts wrong, he would have to call us and be like, hey, how do I fix this? Or if a membership clerk entered in like the wrong birthday for a child of record and wanted to know how to fix that. It was way complex and covered like so many different topics. I mean, I think they say that like it takes about a year, maybe even a year and a half before you really feel like you know what you're doing. Like it takes a very, very long time just because of the broadness of all of it, like all the questions. So
And you mentioned a couple of examples.
yeah, so let's see. For example, I would have bishops call and ask, oh man, let me think. Okay, so temple recommends, right? We merged from having like there was like a certain way they would activate temple recommends. Sorry, it's been a few years since I worked there, but there's a way they used to activate temple recommends, but then it all switched to online. And so I had bishops like calling to ask, okay, how do I activate these recommends? Like, how do we do this process type of stuff? Patriarchal blessings also used to be kind of on paper, but then we moved into a new system called like the patriarchal blessing system. And that's, and so the whole process was online, right? And we would get questions about that from patriarchs or from bishops. And so that's kind of the stuff we were dealing with, is just like software questions, policy questions, record keeping questions. And there was a very strong sense the entire time I worked there of just keeping sensitive information private and sensitive. So I think one of the reasons I was kind of eyed for higher positions is because I took my job very seriously. I remember there was one time, and I think it only happened once. It was my very beginning of working there. I accidentally gave somebody information, and it wasn't anything crazy. I took a phone call. I gave someone the information they were asking for, but I didn't verify that they were actually the bishop. And there's like, I won't get into it because I think that is something really sensitive the church doesn't want people to know. But like when someone
Oh,
calls,
you mean
and
the security bishop number, the SBN?
no, it's when a bishop calls church headquarters to ask about members or like sensitive information, we have to confirm that like it's actually the bishop calling. So like you look at the caller ID and it's their phone number type of thing, right? And there was one time where I didn't do any verification on this guy. And it was not anything crazy that I gave him. It was probably just like information on a member, like just confirming something pretty small. Like it wasn't anything crazy. But I remember as soon as the phone call was over and I realized I hadn't done any verification on him, I felt so guilty and horrible. Like I had broken this rule. I went to my manager and I was like, I just need to tell you something. I was like, I just took a call. I gave the bishop this information, but I didn't verify him. And my manager was like, okay, thanks for letting me know. And I think it, like I said, it wasn't anything crazy because like it didn't go any further than that. They weren't like, oh man, you like breached all of our processes. Like it was a pretty minor thing, but still like it's important that we're making sure that we're giving information to the right people. Anyways, but
And
he
you
was
were
like,
honest about it, and you were contrite, and you were really worried that you goofed up, and the powers that be probably appreciated that. We'll get more to that title later. Was there anything that was going on during this time when you are the answer person? You're with the team of people who are the LUS, local unit support, that information was given or hidden that you found problematic? I'm talking about the patriarchal blessings now for excommunicants.
yeah. So something that really bothered me is I got kind of this inside look of how hard bishops work to keep their wards running. Like, I don't care if you hate your bishop or not, and your bishop probably is an asshole if you hate him. Like, you're allowed to hate him. But, like, also, I think we need to acknowledge, like, how much work goes into that calling. Like, we're not even talking like going to members and visiting them in person or interviews and stuff. Like, I'm talking just like on a record keeping level, how involved bishops are. I mean, it is insane. Like, it's more than a full-time job. Like, I truly do not know how they do it. And so I think there was a lot of sensitivity that I had around not wasting Bishop's time because I knew how busy they were. Like when they called us, it was like, hey, I've tried everything. I need help with this question I have. But they work so hard. Anyways, what that's leading to is the fact that we would have bishops call, and they would sometimes be looking for patriarchal blessings for excommunicated members. So they would say, hey, my member is excommunicated, or this person is excommunicated, but they're working on coming back. And we would like to get them their patriarchal blessing as kind of a source of comfort for them as they continue on their journey. And church headquarters, like the rule around it is excommunicated members can't get their patriarchal blessing, and or can't get a copy of it. They're not allowed to access that while they're excommunicated. And instead of letting us just tell the bishop that, they would have us send the bishop on like a wild goose chase, like all of this process that the bishop had to go through just to find out, oh, you can't get an excommunicated member a copy of their patriarchal blessing. And that really bothered me, like to be on the phone with a bishop and he's like, hey, I have someone, I want to get them their blessing. And I'd be like, okay, well, go through all of these steps. But in my head, I'm thinking, well, they can't get a copy of their blessing. All of our calls were recorded, by the way, for like training purposes, but I think also just for control reasons. So like I couldn't even like sneakily tell a bishop like, hey, excommunicated members actually can't get their patriarchal blessing. Like, stop wasting your time. I'm so sorry. I couldn't even say that to them in a sneaky way because like everything's monitored. So I had to send them on the wild goose chase, and that always rubbed me the wrong way just because.
That seems dishonest.
What was that?
That seems dishonest.
It is. It's so dishonest. And these bishops, they believe in that church so much. Like they're putting so much of their own blood, sweat, and tears into something that I don't believe in anymore. But like, it's so beautiful watching them try to help these people. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna start crying, but like, I saw things that like love from these bishops that like you just don't see anywhere else. And so it really bothered me when they would be asking these questions and I was told to lie to them and like waste their time more because they would be so grateful, like, thank you for telling me how to do this, you know? And I'd be thinking, well, it's not going to get you anywhere. Like, sorry. And so it just bothered me because I felt like church headquarters did not have the bishop's backs, if that makes sense. Like, those are your bishops. They're doing unpaid work for you. How dare you? Like, how dare you not be transparent with them? And that's the whole reason the church is functioning is because they put in so much unpaid labor. Anyways, that's just that. There's a little tangent about that.
Yeah. And I've got no explanation for it, honestly. Maybe somebody out there in the live chat does. Maybe the people in the SCMC monitoring the show know. But I don't understand what the upside of that is. Instead of just saying, no, excommunicated people cannot get a copy of their patriarchal blessing, and that's the end of it. Instead, you're sending the bishop into a brick wall. Actually, you're sending him over a steeplechase course and into a brick wall.
It's like just bureaucracy, I think, where they're like, well, we have to do things in a certain order. And because we don't have authority over the patriarchal blessing process, we can't be the ones to deliver the information. But it's like, why? Why would you send the bishop through this whole thing? It's just it's more work for them. Anyways.
Is it fair to say that overall you really enjoyed this job?
Yes. I so enjoyed my time there. It was hard work. It was very difficult. But the sense of accomplishment, holy crap. Like when I could like we would help people with the bugs with their computers and stuff. And when I could figure it out, when I could give them a solution, like, and it took work, like, I'm not joking. Like, I wish I could explain to you, like, some of these issues we would have and, like, how long it would take to find an answer to, like, fix the glitch they're having or fix their computer issue. It was so rewarding to be able to say, wow, I fixed it. I figured it out. And I mean, I just thrived on it. Like, just just digging into everything and figuring out how it works, how the software works, and what makes it tick. It was very, very rewarding. And so again, like I said, night and day from my mission.
And at some point, you've been in the the LUS, the local unit support division, for a while, and then but you leave that position to go somewhere else within the church. How did that come about?
So I was working in local unit support, and I was told that there were other departments, other places I could go if I wanted to.
By the way, Kate, I'm interrupting you because it's my fault, because you've given me a number of slides, and actually I should be showing some of these to
Oh
catch
yeah,
us up with the
totally
story, because
fine.
they're kind of chronological, and you were nice enough to give me pictures and images to use here. So here is
So
a fun
this
day at
one,
work.
this one was actually once I started working in confidential records. A group of us decided to dress up as one of our coworkers who always wore a red tie
And
and
you're
blue
dressed like
pants.
Keith Erickson. You dressed like Keith Erickson for the day.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. That's a joke about the church
No,
history.
I know. I
He's
know.
a little sloppy in his dress. No biggie.
Yeah. So I wore my husband's tie at the time I was married. So I wore his tie. We all wore red ties, white shirt, because that's, church dress code, and then a blue skirt because this coworker always wore blue pants. So yeah, that's just a little fun thing. I don't have a lot of pictures for my time at the church, so I had to dig really deep for this. If anyone's wondering, like, why are you showing this picture? It's because I don't have a lot of recorded stuff about my time at church headquarters. So,
And that's for a reason, I take it.
Sort of frowned upon.
yeah, very sensitive stuff.
And people wonder why it's hard to find evidence of Joseph Smith practicing polygamy.
I know. Well, and you'll notice the computer monitor behind me is off. Like, it was just, we had to be so careful.
Oh, that's a computer monitor.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay, I just hadn't recognized it, but of course it is. And you're saying it was off on purpose? It's not just resting?
I would guess it's either off on purpose or resting, but like any picture that I would have taken at church headquarters, I would have made sure to like have a blank monitor behind me. Either
Is
turned
secrecy
off all the
important
way
there?
or just blank. What was that?
I'm sorry, you said this is in the next place. This is in the confidential records. Of course, it would be very confidential, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go to the next one, which is an email that you had sent. Now, this is your maiden name, correct? Child?
So this is my married name. I'm now going by my maiden name.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So
In Venezuela. So
yeah,
Kate
in
Child is your
Venezuela.
married name, but that's you. You're the floor lead, the local unit support, LUS, correct? At the bottom there?
Yeah. So this is just an example of some of the questions we would get. I'm trying to kind of show like the breadth and scope of our work. And this was actually, I don't want to get into it in too much detail, but I eventually in my time at the church, I was promoted to be a floor lead. And this was one of the emails that I sent about the missionary online recommendation system.
Kate, somebody's asking, did you guys have a dress code? Was it like
Yes.
Sunday kind of clothing every day, or what was the?
We had to wear church clothes, and then I think, was it in 2018 they said that women could start wearing pants? I don't remember, but yeah, so while I was there, we went from having to wear skirts to we could wear pants. But like, I mean, it was, you had to wear a shirt and tie if you were a man, and then if you were a woman, it was like nice clothes. Once we started being allowed to wear pants, I think a lot of guys got really jealous because they were like, well, we have to wear ties and like a button-up shirt, and they can just wear whatever they want, really. Because like, I mean, we couldn't wear jeans, right? But we could wear slacks, and that was really nice.
And then somebody else here is asking, current church employee here, did your supervisors not listen to your concerns about that policy? And I'm assuming
that's my brother, I think.
Oh, I got you. I was wondering if that's the patriarchal blessing question, or what policy specifically maybe.
I had thought it was the one about sending the bishops on the goose chase.
Yeah, right.
Of course, I don't know when this comment was made.
Right. Oh crap, my dog just turned off my light.
That's an amazing dog you have there.
Oh, he's very cute. He's also a little bit of a menace. But yeah, I don't know what that commenter does at the church, but in the position I was in, we weren't really in a place to give feedback. This was literally probably this email that you're showing right now was one of the only times I was ever given a voice to say, hey, this policy really sucks.
Maybe
Like,
that's what the commenter is talking about. Maybe this is what they're talking about. And by the way, this is a policy. You gave me the thumbnail version today when you sent it to me. I know this is sort of for illustrative purposes to show the kind of stuff that you would be involved in.
yeah.
But up on the first line where it says, I'm really glad this issue is being talked about and addressed, it had to do with computer tech support for non-English speaking local units, correct?
Right. So
Okay.
I was really frustrated continually, honestly, during my time at the church, just because I felt like like outside of the US, there just wasn't a lot of support. Again, this was 6 years ago now, 6, 7, 8 years ago, right? And so maybe things have changed since then, and I hope that they have. But at the time I was working there, we did not get to give feedback. Like, it was just, these are the policies, these are the procedures. And it was only once something became a really, really big problem that I could give any feedback. Like I said, this email is one of the only times I was ever really asked about my experience and my opinion about something. And I, as you can tell in the email, I really took the time to say, hey, I really think this isn't working.
Yes.
So, for what it's worth. But yeah,
And
the
when you say
patriarchal
for the
blessing stuff, no, that's way, way, way above my pay grade. There's just no way that I would have been influenced, or like that I would have had any influence on that one.
When you're working in that position, don't you sort of like, hey, prophet seers and revelators have made these decisions or approved them at the very least. Who am I to get in the way of that?
Yeah, that too. You have to have some level of being very conforming, right, to work for the church, because when you run into these things that really bother you, you kind of have to explain them away or just grit your teeth, right, and just say, well, like, there's nothing I can do. But yeah, that was something I ran into a lot, of just like trying to justify things and say, well, somebody smarter than me or somebody with more authority. We talked about that a lot too. Somebody with more authority than me knows this situation better than I do, and so I'm not going to complain about it.
You say that like this was a common refrain that you heard from people?
Um, I think it was more something I would tell myself when I got really frustrated. I
Mm.
don't know. I would say too, there is kind of an attitude like that at church headquarters of just, well, somebody higher up did this thing or had this revelation, or they really prayed about this, and um that's why we're like doing it this way.
Got it. Kate, we got to break into the show for an important announcement. Gavin's getting married next week and wants you to know. I don't
Hey,
know if
thanks,
I don't think
Gavin.
it's a proposal. He's probably related to you. His last name's Whitaker.
Yeah, that is my brother. He definitely could have found some ways to reach out to me that wasn't right now. So I'm estranged from most of my family. So
Gavin.
yeah. Anyone with the last name Whitaker, you do not have to show their comments on here.
Woo, woo, woo. Okay. All right. So correction taken. Thank you. We'll make
No,
sure that
totally
happens.
fine.
Or doesn't happen, as the case may be.
Somebody else does. I want to, and again, I don't need
Go ahead.
to
Go
jump
ahead,
in,
Bill.
but I want to sort of make sure a few of these get tackled. So somebody asked, is the office culture as churchy as you think? We all sort of imagine that everyone working in these positions around other people sort of feel the pressure that we all have to sort of look our Sunday best in conversation, in how we conduct ourselves, right? Our decorum. I'll use that term from the presidential address last night. But did you guys ever like joke around and say sort of the funny off-color joke at the water cooler, or is it sort of everybody just looks and talks the part?
Okay. I think this kind of ties into confidential records. So can I skip to that? Can we
Sure.
talk about that really quick?
Yeah.
Because so in local unit support, it was very, very, very much, we do not, we don't swear, we don't make off-color jokes, we don't talk about inappropriate things, like very much Sunday school in that way, right? Like you would never make some of those jokes like to your bishop, right? And that's basically how it was, at least in my department. So I don't know what the culture's like in other places. I think it kind of is influenced by various managers, but the church is also very meticulous about like who they pick. So in my experience, it was very just normal stuff, like very you weren't allowed to make off color jokes, but
So very church. So it was like going to church.
yeah, we would do a devotional once a week and like say a prayer and stuff like that, like before our meetings.
Every meeting, every day.
Oh man, I don't remember for sure, but I want to say like pretty frequently we
I
would
think
pray
so.
before meetings. Yeah.
I mean, we're always saying opening prayers. We did it before every Japanese class at the MTC.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was kind of that same thing of just the church culture had permeated into obviously into church employment as well.
Yeah.
But once I moved into confidential records, I mean, we were dealing. Let's fully shift there if that's okay, because I have a lot to say about it.
We want to hear it.
Once I moved into confidential records, we were dealing with just horrible stuff. Like, so you're reading, so in confidential records, you're reading disciplinary council documents, you're reading name removal documents, you're reading requests to the first presidency. This wasn't something I did, but my coworkers did. You're reading requests to the first presidency asking to like cancel sealings and stuff, but like people are like writing these letters that we had to read, and like I'm reading disciplinary council notes, and like some of it was pretty light and not very triggering or anything, but major trigger warnings ahead for people. But like, I mean, we would read about child abuse, we were reading about like spousal abuse, like pretty severe cases of spousal abuse, situations where like one spouse would be leading like a whole double life, spending like all of their 401k and retirement money without their wife knowing, and then their wife is like financially ruined, and all of this comes to light. So I basically all day you're just reading about ways people hurt each other, and in like pretty severe ways that people hurt each other. And it was
And Mormon people hurting each other.
Yeah, which was horrible, and not, it was not a fun time for me. Once I transferred over there, I was getting paid more. It was a little less stressful, or like a little, that's not the right word, because it was still stressful, but it was slower paced.
What is the purpose of having you read these documents?
Oh man. Okay, let me think about how to answer this without saying too much. But okay, so let's say for example, a bishop does a disciplinary council. He decides that he's excommunicating a member. We had to read through the council documents to make sure that there was nothing in there that needed to be addressed. So like, let's say the bishop marks, okay, this guy committed adultery, right? And that's why he's being excommunicated. We would read through the documents, and let's say we find out the person he committed adultery with is 17. So it's not adultery, it's child abuse. Like at that point, if you're doing that with a minor, it's child abuse. So and then we would have to go through this whole process of contacting the bishop and saying, hey bishop, like this isn't adultery, like this is child abuse, you know? And I could go on about the church, like the bishop helpline. I did not help with that at all. So in most cases, we would just transfer them to the helpline, and we all know how that goes. The church doesn't do anything. But anyways, that's why we would read the documents, is because sometimes the bishop would be like, oh, he committed fornication, but then you would read the documents and you're like, well, no, this is child abuse. Like that's not just, oh, he hooked up with somebody one night, you know?
So does he have to modify the document and send it back in to reflect child abuse?
I don't want to talk too much about that.
Okay.
I'm talking a lot about stuff that's pretty sensitive.
Okay. Can you say, by the way, can you just address for the audience why it is you're having to censor yourself? Is there anything you can say about that? Like why it is that you can answer some questions and not answer others?
A lot of people who watch have never been Mormon. So keep that in mind as you answer. Yeah.
So the church is very concerned about the sensitivity around like their processes and keeping information private. And I don't want your show, honestly, to get like a cease and desist, and I don't want to get a cease and desist letter from the church's legal department.
Do you think that just talking about the processes would be sufficient for that?
It may be a case of not wanting to risk it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to find out. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah.
Like, and there's also a lot of stuff that I know that could create headaches for the church, and not even like in a PR way. Like, so I'm not talking like, oh, this big secret I have. I'm just saying I could mess up a lot of the church processes and procedures if I share too much information, and I don't want to do that. Just because I'm not out to like ruin people's lives who are working for the church, or like make their lives more miserable, or like create problems for them that they have to solve.
Right.
So I just have to be really careful about how much I say. And again, it took me 5 years to even come onto somebody's platform and talk about this. So like it's very, very sensitive, and they put the fear of God into you when you're working there.
But
I withdraw the question.
Yeah, but suffice it to say, you would go through the disciplinary documents meticulously to make sure that procedurally everything is on the up and up with what it claims to be. And if not, it was your job to sort of catch things that weren't being defined the right way.
But the reason it's important is because there's an annotation to a membership file that occurs with child abuse that does not occur with adultery, correct?
Exactly. So like, let's say someone's disfellowshipped for adultery, but you find out it's child abuse, like you have to annotate their record. So I think it's like to cover the church's butt, is they're like, well, we have to annotate. And anyways, so we would check the documents just to make sure, okay, like everything was done the right way, right? Like the correct sins were marked. They actually did just commit adultery. It wasn't child abuse or whatever else, right? So that's mostly why, is just to make sure procedurally everything was being followed, because sometimes bishops are new. Sometimes they've never held a disciplinary council before, right? Like here I am processing so many every day, but a bishop, maybe it's his first one ever and he doesn't know what he's doing. And so you just have to make sure that they follow everything according to the handbook and just procedurally, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Do you
that's
remember-
go ahead, Ben. No,
Uh,
please.
Okay, I was just gonna say, did you ever sign like an NDA or anything like that, where you sort of sign that you're not going to talk about certain things?
I think I did sign an NDA. I honestly don't remember for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they really presented it to me as an NDA. I think they're just kind of like, hey, this is just something that says you'll keep church information private, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is stuff I could have, like, I had access to so much stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so like, let's
You're
say,
not
for
talking about
example,
any of the details, any of the names of the people who were disciplined
Right.
and what it was that they got
What the settlements
excommunicated for.
were, right.
and that is like the sensitive stuff, right? And is like, if I was to tell like names or addresses or things like that, that's when I would get really busted probably.
Right.
But yeah.
And we would never ever want you to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the thing about the bishop, and my question was this: was that you were reading through all these awful reports every day. I mean, it's 40 hours a week, it's full time, and you're looking for details in order to annotate. But does this process of reading these horrible things over and over, which you have to do with members of your church who have heard the same teachings that you've heard about not doing these bad things that get them excommunicated, did that have an impact on your spirit?
Oh, for sure. So I remember I got to a point while I was working there where I would be in public looking around at people, and I got so paranoid. Like it really breeds a lot of paranoia to work there, because all you're not reading about people who have great lives. Like you're not reading about people who have like done good things. You're reading about people who have secrets. You're reading
Mhm.
about people who have hurt the people closest to them and betrayed them or just deeply wounded them. And I think it really, really affected me. Like I would be standing in public, like at Cafe Rio. I remember specifically standing in a Cafe Rio, and I looked around at everyone in the room, and all I could think was, every person in this room has a deepest, darkest secret. And like, I mean, it just warps your sense of reality almost, because I don't believe that anymore, where I'm like, everyone has like this secret double life. And sure, like we've all done things we're not proud of, and like things that maybe like we wouldn't want blasted online or something, but like I'm talking like deep dark secrets, like where people have been abusing kids for decades and it never
Yeah.
comes out, and like, or bishops have been, you know, grooming their, like YSA bishops have been grooming women in their ward or whatever it is. And so that really, really messed with me. But it also was so liberating. And I'll explain why. I had been told my whole life that, like, I don't want to say anything too crude on here, but like, I'd been told my whole life that like masturbation and pornography were wrong and bad and terrible. But you're reading like all these cases of like children being abused, and suddenly you're like, wait a minute. Like, kids being abused, that is bad and horrible, and I truly believe that. But why have I been made to feel like total shit my whole life over all of these natural impulses and things that don't matter, like coffee, garments? Like I could not believe that God knew what I knew. God knows everybody's deepest secrets, and here I am reading everybody's deepest secrets. I couldn't believe that God was privy to everyone's deepest, darkest secrets and still cared about coffee and still cared about garments. So I stopped wearing my garments while I was working there, because I was like, this isn't a big deal. Like, I can't believe that it is anymore. I've read so many things that are truly terrible: abuse, children getting abused, you know, manipulation and lies among spouses and things like that. And I just couldn't believe anymore that these dumb little rules mattered at all. Like, I had seen it with my own two eyes. I was like, garments don't affect anybody. I mean, sure, if they're important to you, keep wearing them. But I didn't feel like they were important for me. And I couldn't believe anymore that God would care, because I had read the worst of the worst. And I started to realize that the reason, have you heard before that like the church discourages people from like sharing their sins or like their previous sins with people publicly? They're like, don't go up to the pulpit and say and talk about previous sins. Like, we want to keep that private. Have you heard that ever?
I'm not sure I've heard it expressed that way, but I've never heard, well, I don't recall hearing someone talk
Okay.
about it. How about you,
I
Bill, Bishop Bill?
Yeah, you wanted to sort of stay away from people like using fast and testimony, for instance, to come up to the stand and to confess sins. And yes, we were counseled as bishops in our stake, and I don't remember who said it or what meeting it was in, but we were counseled to sort of curtail quickly any efforts to sort of confess from the pulpit.
And of course, the
exactly.
strange thing is that that's the opposite of the way it was in section 20 of the Doctrine and Covenants, where you're told as part of repentance to confess them publicly.
I know. Yeah. So like, and I even heard when I was growing up, just, you shouldn't even talk about your past sins publicly. Like, it should be pretty private. And I
Right.
started to realize while I was working there that one of the reasons they wanted to keep all of that private was for control, because once you start talking about your own shortcomings and sins, it normalizes them. So like, for example, if somebody says, oh yeah, I broke the law of chastity like 3 years ago, but I'm fine now and I'm like a good member of the church in good standing, I think it makes people get rid of their shame, right? If you hear, oh, someone has this same struggle that I have,
Hmm.
the shame goes away, because you realize you're not alone. You think you're the only one struggling. You think you're the only one kind of slipping up sometimes. But as I would read these disciplinary council documents, I was like, oh my gosh, all of these little sins that the church lets me feel like shit for, like total crap, they don't matter. And because I've seen the real harm being done. So that was big for me. And again, it was a very dark place to work, just because you are just dealing with people's sins all day. So to answer somebody's question earlier, we did kind of joke around a lot. I had a coworker who swore. He would come to me with a disciplinary counsel and he'd be like, look at what this jackass did. Like, he would like say, I don't
Oh my
remember the
gosh,
specific
language.
yeah, like
He
he would,
said jackass.
yeah, he said jackass. He would say that word, but I think it was his way of coping, because it really was that bad. Like, some of the stuff we were reading really was just, I mean, so you can't even think swearing's bad anymore, right? Because you're like, well, at least I'm not like abusing a child. Like
Yeah,
that's the worst.
you're not a
No.
single adult bishop grooming young women, right?
Right.
Exactly. Like you can't believe anymore that these sins even matter, because it's like, yeah, jackass, I said it, now what? Like nobody's hurt by that. You know, people could be offended, but like you're not going to ruin a child's life forever by saying the word jackass or by
No.
drinking
No.
coffee, you know?
Right.
I'll just say, Kate, I've been spending the last month or so, and I already sort of know these things, but I'm refreshing myself working on a project off to the side that has to do with high demand fundamentalist religions generally. And one of the things that's just crystal clear is that all high demand fundamentalist religions make a really distinct effort to make sure people feel broken. And so when you say like you can't really confess your sins out loud, church doesn't want that. They want you to feel the shame of you're the only sinner. I remember going into a sacrament meeting and church on Sundays, and the women are wearing dresses, the men are wearing suits, we're all smiling. And you sort of wonder every week, like, am I the only one who is having a fight with my wife and being too harsh with my kids? Or like, is everybody perfect here? Because it feels like that. And then you read the manuals, the teachings of the presidents of the church, and every one of those prophets is so good. They're making pies at home, they're playing with the kids, they're doing all the great things. Nobody in Mormonism in these lessons talks about flaws ever. And it's intentional. It's meant to make you feel shame and brokenness because it's part of what keeps you in. You're broke and they've got the medicine, and you're always got this carrot on a stick that you mentioned earlier, that there's always sort of that perfection is always somewhere in the future, and the shame and guilt is in the here and now.
Exactly. Yeah, you described it perfectly, because I think I did not have a community outside of Mormonism when I was a church employee, and like basically my whole life I did not have a community outside of Mormonism. So I did spend my whole life thinking I was the broken one if I slipped up in, I mean, we're talking in very, very small ways. Like if I felt anger, if um I yeah, just small little things. And working for the church and reading those documents really made me realize, holy crap, like we're all dealing with stuff, and some of it really is bad, right? Like I never changed my stance on child abuse. I've always thought it's wrong. I still think it's wrong, obviously, but I changed my stance on a lot of other things while I worked there. Because I would be working on like a child abuse case, right? Like I'd process it, I'd read the whole document, I'd have to read all the details. Horrible, not fun. And then I would move on to my next case, and it would be a disfellowshipment, right? And it would be someone who like hooked up with their girlfriend. And I just couldn't care. I could not care less that somebody hooked up with their girlfriend consensually, had a good time, whatever, because I had just read this child abuse case with this poor little kid who's going to be affected for the rest of their life. And then I move on to read, oh, he fornicated with his girlfriend and he's so evil, he broke the law of chastity. And I'm just like, I don't care. And I got to the point where I realized I also don't think that God would care. There's no way that God is so intimately aware of the harm that happens to kids and then decides, oh, but I'm going to be really strict on people who are hooking up with each other too. Like I couldn't believe it anymore, because I had read about the horrors. Like I had read the true horrors of what people do to each other to hurt those that are weaker than them or more vulnerable. And so I just couldn't believe that like an expression of love, or even just an expression of like being horny, like I just didn't think that was wrong anymore. And it really shifted a lot of things for me. And I just really started to evaluate, like, what do I actually believe? And I guess as I was pretty good at masking it. And I think all of my coworkers were extremely depressed. Like, I think all of us were. I remember, who came to talk to us? It was a 70, I want to say, came to talk to our department at one point. And I remember one of my coworkers raising his hand, and he just said, do you ever get really depressed? Because the 70 has to read some of the same stuff we read. And he's like, how do you deal with that? And like, I knew it came from somewhere deep in his heart, because like we all were feeling it. That's all you read all day. Like it just changes your view of the world in really unhealthy ways. And I remember he gave like some half-hearted answer about like, oh, Jesus, like if you just lean on Jesus type of crap. But yeah, I think so one of the reasons we turned to like off-color humor and stuff was because it was very, very depressing to work there. But I did a good job working there. Like I was very good at it. I had high numbers. Eventually, my manager pulled me aside and said that he wanted to talk to me about giving me a couple of additional tasks. And are we ready to start talking about that?
Yes. Now we're getting into the SCMC stuff. So can I ask you a couple questions? Now, this comes from your manager. He reaches out to you
Can
because
we
he's
pause
impressed
for
by
a
your
second?
work performance. And
Oh,
we're going to have
sorry.
Bill asking a question. What, Bill?
Yeah, can we pause for just a second? For those who are not Mormon, the church has a Strengthening Church Members Committee. It's a committee in the church that's headed up sometimes by apostles,
2 apostles, always.
okay, and then members of the 70, and their job is to collect information on any naysayers, critics of the church, both inside and out, or anybody bringing any sort of bad publicity into the church in the public arena. And so the SCMC is a secret organization. It was leaked that this organization existed. What's the gentleman's name? It's the same from the
Pace.
ritual abuse. Yeah.
I think it's George Pace or Glenn
George
Pace. I always get those 2 confused. But this is the one who was the 70.
Yep. And it leaks to the public that this group exists. The church did not want anyone to know about it. Back in like the 70s, they were sending people to like gay bars to wait out in the parking lot and take pictures of license plates. And it is sort of like big spy stuff that the church did then and still to this day does. And so for folks who maybe pay attention to high demand groups like Scientology, who do a lot of sort of spying on their members, Mormonism is one of those groups that does that as well.
So, Kate, did your manager mention the Strengthening Church Members Committee? Did he mention the name of it to you?
He did, and I remember being really surprised. I hit it pretty well, but I remember thinking like, oh, so that committee is real. Like, okay, like because
You'd heard of it.
I'm pretty sure I had heard of it, but I thought it had been done away with, right? Like I knew it had existed, but I didn't know it was still a thing. And he told me that I couldn't talk to my coworkers about this. He told me that if I did, I would be in a lot more trouble than with just my job. I mean, he like really laid it down and was like, you cannot tell anyone. And that's already what they kind of tell you in confidential records is like, you cannot speak to even your spouse about this stuff. You can be vague. You can say, oh, I worked on a hard child abuse case, but you can't say anything else. So I was afraid to even talk to like my therapist about the stuff that I was going through when I worked there. Anyways, but yeah, he just said, I have some tasks or like some assignments for you from the Strengthening Church Membership Committee. And they were very secretarial and administrative. So I didn't really do any like sleuthing or spying or trying to like find people to like spy on. It was mostly him giving me names and me kind of, well, he would give me newspaper clippings, and he would also give me like names to of like people to write summaries about. But I mean, which one do we want to talk about first? RFM? Do we want to talk about newspapers? Yeah.
Newspaper clippings first, because there's 2 parts to this, which is one is people who have been found guilty of some kind of criminal charge, which could result in church discipline, which we'll talk about first. And the second is people who haven't committed a crime, but they have been vocal about criticisms of the church.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Let's talk about the newspaper clippings and the senior missionary, because they actually still do clip newspapers, apparently.
I know. Well, and it's so funny. I found a Deseret News article from like 1990 that said specifically like we look through newspapers and blah blah blah. And I just thought that was funny because I'm like, wow, they still do that. But
Kate, I just want you to know that article was published, and I know we talked about this. That was published as a response from the church spokesperson,
mm,
because in response to the leak of its existence and an attempt to
right,
downplay its importance and significance.
right. So, um, oh man, okay. So I would get these newspaper clippings, and there was a senior missionary somewhere. I don't even know his name. I don't know. I never met him, but there's a senior missionary tasked with looking through newspapers and cutting out stories of like high profile criminal cases or events that had happened, and usually they were pretty significant. So I'm not talking like minor stuff. It was like somebody embezzled money from their company, or a murder. Like I sent out some really heartbreaking ones for like murder that like teenagers had done. Like it was really sad. And um I remember the bishop. I might start crying again, but like I could tell he just really cared about this kid because he was in a really bad place and like had attempted murder on somebody. And this kid, like so the bishop wrote like a letter back and just said like, or maybe it was a stake president, but he just said that this kid had like looked at him and was like, "Do you think the Lord can ever forgive me?" And like I could just see like the care that these leaders had for these people who had done awful things, but like it was so compassionate. Um, anyways, those newspaper clippings dealt with like very serious things like child abuse, and
Now,
murder.
I think most news clippings of that sort don't mention the religion of the person who's
Correct.
convicted. So what
Correct.
did you do with that?
So I was tasked with looking up the person's name to see if they were a member. And if they were a member, I would send a copy of that newspaper clipping and a letter to the stake president just saying, "Hey, we found out your member did this. Please look into any action that might be necessary. Please minister to them, including church discipline if necessary."
So
Um,
these aren't news clippings from all across the country. They're in Mormon rich environments, right?
they were all in Utah, which
Yeah.
makes sense because we have a really high Mormon population here. But yeah, I don't think I ever got any. Well, I think I don't know if I should say this. I think I got a newspaper clipping about the Bundys, if you remember that, the wildlife preserve. Yeah, I think I
Those
got
Bundy,
one
yeah.
about them, but I think that had already been dealt with. I won't say anything more than that, but yeah, I think that had already been dealt with.
Okay.
Um,
Now, tell us when you got the clippings and you check out and you find out, oh, this is a member of the church. What did you do? What was
so
your job?
I would scan the newspaper clipping and send a letter to the stake president with the newspaper clipping, just saying, "Hey, your member did this, and um, and like please look into like church discipline if necessary," kind of thing.
Now, this letter, this is the template that we talked about.
Yeah, and
And it
I
sounds to me that you had access to a template that's sent out to stake presidents about disciplining their members.
so I I had a template with letterhead on it, basically from the Area 70. I don't know who the Area 70 is in Utah, and I think there might be even multiple in Utah, maybe one or two Area 70s, just because there's so many Mormons here. But it was on behalf of the Area 70 that I would be sending that letter, basically saying, so it was like, it wasn't me sending it. It was like, "Hey, Area 70 is sending stake president this letter saying, please look into church discipline for this member because they did this thing." So that it, like I said, it was secretarial, but it was also me kind of like the Area 70 had like an agreement where, "Hey, we want confidential records to be the one sending this out on my behalf when these situations occur." Does that make sense?
So you're still working in the confidential records division, but you're doing administrative work for the SCMC?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this a little bit, but just you and me.
Mhm.
But so 40 hours a week, confidential records, and I would maybe devote 1 hour a week to SCMC stuff. But like, I mean, 1 hour is like that's a generous estimate because yeah, it wasn't the bulk of my work. Like the bulk of my work still was disciplinary councils, reading name removal letters, and stuff like that.
Okay. So this letter that you had a template of, how did it get signed, by the way? Was it signed at all?
I believe it was an electronic signature that I had permission to add to the document from the Area 70.
Yeah. Well, and did you ever meet the Area 70?
No.
You see, this is one of the things that strikes me as odd. You've got a senior missionary cutting up newspapers. You've got an administrative person yourself, and the letter template to stake presidents. And apparently it's going along unsupervised for large portions of time.
So we were pretty siloed. I think I've talked to you about that a little bit. Like, it was kind of like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand doeth kind of thing, because even the letters I was sending out on behalf of the 70 was like I would CC him, like I would be sending a letter to him too, like because he didn't even know this was going on. So it was like, okay, I find out about this thing, I send letter to Area 70, and I send letter to stake president as if it's the Area 70.
You have, what is that called? It's called divine investiture of authority is the doctrine in the Mormon Church. And you got a piece of that from the area president, apparently.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it was very controlled, right? Like, there's no way I could have just sent out a letter. Like, I would have been so busted. Like, it was very, very specific. Like,
Yes.
you can only send these out for this very specific purpose. And like, I was very trustworthy, so that's what I did.
Right. And I think most people in our audience and elsewhere wouldn't have much trouble with letters going out to stake presidents about disciplining members who have committed serious crimes.
Right. Because those are important. Like, because what would happen, I think what they were trying to prevent is sometimes somebody would go to prison and the church would lose track of them. And then the person comes back as if nothing's happened and tries to come back to church, but the church doesn't know their history. And so then it just sets up like something kind of dangerous, right? So like, let's say it is a child abuse situation, or, sexual assault, right? They were convicted of something. That we don't want wolves in sheep's clothing in the ranks of in the congregation. So it's just a way of protecting the church to say, okay, we're going to nip this in the bud and make sure that the leaders know so they can hold a council. Does that make sense?
Yes. Kate, what can you tell us about annotated membership records?
Okay. What I can tell you is that if the church finds out somebody has abused a child, they annotate the record. That's the policy. That is the policy. So I know sometimes, a lot of times, we see stories come out publicly that are like, oh, the church knew about this and didn't do anything. I would say it's such a complicated topic because there's so many ways things can slip through the cracks, I want to say. But like, for real, the policy is you annotate that record. If you find out about child abuse, like, that is the rule. I don't know what it was like before I worked there, but like, they took that super seriously. And but again, I acknowledge that there's a lot of ways it slips through the cracks because we see that all the time in these lawsuits, right? Where it's like, well, the church knew and didn't do anything. But like, as far as I was concerned, anytime I found out about child abuse, I had the power and I went in and I clicked the annotate record button. Like, that was what I would do. So,
did you ever annotate anybody for being gay or trans?
So no, the church used to put annotations on records for being gay, and that stopped. Okay, I could be wrong with this year, but I want to say it was 2008 that the church removed all of those annotations. But I do know that they used to put annotations on records, and they finally realized that that was a huge mistake and that just a horrible policy. And then they removed all those annotations. Do you want me to talk about my little story? Just the
Sure.
bishop who called?
Yes, please.
So I had a bishop call me, and he said one of my members is really distraught because he thinks his record has an annotation on it for being gay. And he said, I keep telling him I don't see an annotation on his record. Everything's fine. But he insists that there is an annotation on his record. And so I look at this member's record, He did not have an annotation on there, but it did show that he used to, because the church, like I said, used to annotate records for being gay. And this is like, even if they hadn't done anything at all, like the church would annotate it and be like, they can't work with kids.
Can we stop for just a
Anyways,
second there?
yeah.
Okay, because that raises a question. So you can look in the church office building or church administration building on your system, which has more information than the bishop has access to, correct?
Yes.
And you can see that it's not on his record, but you can also see that it was on his record.
I could see the history of his record. Yes. This is like very sensitive stuff I'm talking about, but yeah.
So so when something's removed, it's not removed in toto. It is simply removed, but you can still see at that level that it used to be there.
Yeah, because I think the church just wants a record of literally everything. Like they're a record keeping people. So like, I mean, I'm telling you though, like at my old job in local unit support, I would not have been able to see that. Like this is high level stuff. Like there is just, I mean, I think there are probably only those employees in that department that can see that. Like anyone else, if you were to call church headquarters and ask, they would have said the same thing, that they don't see an annotation and that there's nothing there. So I just had very, very high level access. And
all right, so back to your story. The bishop's calling and you can see what you can see, but what can you tell the bishop?
So I tell the bishop there is no annotation on his record. And the bishop says, was there ever an annotation on his record? And I didn't know what to say because I'm not supposed to tell him that there was a record of it there. So I go to my supervisor.
So you have to say, hold. I have to put you on hold, Bishop?
Yeah, I just said, hey, hang on, let me put you on hold for 1 minute, Bishop. I'll be right back. I just have to check something.
If I'm the bishop, you've already answered the question, but go ahead.
Oh, he knew. He was smart. I think he knew immediately. But I went to my supervisor. Again, all of our calls are like monitored. So I had to like do my due diligence. So I go to my supervisor and I was like, hey, this bishop wants to know, was his record ever annotated? And it was. Like, what can I tell him? And she told me, so this is my supervisor. I had a manager who was a man and then my supervisor. But anyways, she told me that all I could say was there is no annotation on his record right now. So that's what I told him. I came back and I was like, I said, there is no annotation on his record. And he said, well, you can't tell me if there used to be. And I said, there is no annotation on his record. And that was my answer, which honestly felt horrible. Like, if I'm being completely honest, it was not a great conversation on my end, because I'm like, why can't I just comfort this member and say, yes, you're not crazy. You're not crazy that there used to be annotations on records and the church retracted that. But instead, I just have to
is it because they're busy
dumb.
not emphasizing it and just trying to forget about it and not talk about it anymore and not let that information out? Is that what you think it's about?
I think they're just trying to cover their tracks, right? I mean, they have such a history of doing problematic and hurtful things, and I don't think they want to admit guilt. So it's really easy for them to just be like, no, that never happened. Like, what do you mean? But I think that's horrible that this bishop was trying to comfort a member. And even if we could just acknowledge, yes, the church made a mistake once and said all of these records should be annotated. And then they saw the error of their ways and they took the annotations away. I think that's a much better answer, obviously. But the church loves to just play dumb and play stupid. And like, I've had theories before that in the time since I've started talking about confidential records publicly, I've had theories that maybe they changed the name of the department so that they could like pretend that maybe that department never existed. I don't know if they've done that. I don't follow that very closely.
Well, this is how you catch them, because they're not hard to catch when they're lying. They insist in answering questions that have to do with the past tense only in the present tense.
Or the current
tense. I think Elder Holland tried this on the BBC, didn't he, Bill?
Yeah, the BBC interview about Mitt Romney and making temple oaths, penalty oaths. Yes.
I mean, he's a terrible lying technique. If you're going to lie, just lie. Okay. Don't try and be deceptive and say, did Mitt Romney take these penalties, these oaths in the temple? And answer by saying, there are no penalties in the temple, because then, like a bishop calling Kate, you say, well, but did there used to be? Wah,
that
wah.
there used to be.
Now the truth
Yeah.
comes out, and you look like you were trying to hide it, Elder Holland.
Which you were. Just two things. One is, folks listening, I think this is a really important conversation for folks to sort of understand how things work behind the scenes. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Those things will help this video get more visibility in front of other folks on YouTube. So we very much appreciate that. I want to ask a question, and I just want to see if you knew this was happening. So John DeLynn did an interview on Mormon Stories years and years ago with a young man who worked for the church, and his job was to infiltrate social media groups. And he actually did it as a woman. He created a fake profile with a female female visual face of somebody that was just some image on the internet, gave it a name, put some posts out on Facebook, and allowed themselves to be perceived as a woman and infiltrate social media groups that were post-Mormon or nuanced Mormon to do what you were doing, which was to sort of keep an eye on people.
It was like the Mormon version of The Crying Game.
But under the fall, by the way, that's a horrible movie, I think, but that's okay.
It got nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, well, they did it under the false premise of fooling nuanced Mormons and post-Mormons into thinking this was a post-Mormon woman when it was really a guy working for the church. And then years later, there was another guy named Pasco Wellington, fake profile again. That was the name, Pasco Wellington. And he did the same thing. He infiltrated multiple groups. And he did what you did, which was he took pictures of documents, put them together on a member who was in trouble, sent them to the bishop. The bishop sat down, except he forgot to remove his little spot of his Facebook profile being the one capturing the screenshot. So it said Pasco Wellington on there, and it got back to all of us in the post-Mormon community in social media groups that that this guy wasn't a real person. He was posing as someone. So I know for a fact that's true, that those things were happening. There's been, I think, one other person too. So I think there's 3 different data points that point to this occurring.
You mean Pasco Wellington isn't a real name?
No, Pasco Wellington isn't a real
You're
name.
not thinking about that Neville or that Nygren?
Richard Nygren, the first Black Mormon apologist,
Yes.
is also a fictional person. But again, so apologists like to play sort of a game like this too. Were you aware on any level of people working for the church doing what you were doing, but even going a step further and creating fake profiles and infiltrating social media groups under a false premise in order to capture data on people?
So I wasn't aware of that. I have to be careful because I don't want to assume too much and pretend like maybe I know exactly what was going on, because I never heard about that while I worked there. But if I had to guess, I would guess that is one of the departments or groups that my manager ended up telling me about. He never went into specifics, but he told me, like, there are departments you don't know about. And he's like, if you continue to do a really good job, and if you continue to want to grow in this organization, you could move into these departments and groups. And I didn't know exactly what he meant. I just assumed it was very sensitive and confident, even more confidential than what I was doing. But that doesn't surprise me at all. Especially just given, I mean, they have a senior missionary clipping out stuff out of newspapers, but like you need someone more tech savvy to like create a whole fake profile and stuff. Occasionally we would use our own Facebook accounts to look up people. So I would find out about something and I would just look them up, but it wasn't like to engage with them. I wasn't talking to them or anything. It was just to see, like, who is this guy? Like, who is this weird dude that I'm hearing about? But yeah, that I was not aware of that while I worked there. I did end up hearing about it later.
Is that a good enough answer? I mean, are you done with that line of questioning?
Yes, I just wanted to get her point of view because I think it's another interesting facet that folks would be sort of surprised by, is that the church has employees that go under false premise and infiltrate groups to collect information.
Yeah, and I think it kind of shows too, again, how siloed we are. Because I wasn't aware of these people, but I was still doing work for the SCMC. And I'm sure that whoever was involved in creating fake profiles was somehow involved in the SCMC as well, but they didn't know I existed. They didn't know what I was doing. So it's just really interesting.
So, Kate, you're in confidential records, which itself is very confidential, and you don't talk about it outside. What happens in confidential records stays in confidential records. But now you're also being asked to spend a little bit of your time each week to do administrative work for the SCMC. Now, did your manager have a discussion with you about not talking to anybody else in confidential records about what you were doing for the SCMC? Or was that okay for everybody else to know?
No, he said I couldn't even tell them that the committee existed. He said I could not say anything to my coworkers. It was just between me and him. At one point, he told me, he's like, Quentin L. Cook, Elder Cook is really proud of you for the work you're doing. He's really grateful for it. And I think he genuinely was passing along a message directly from Elder Cook, because I think Elder Cook was over the committee at the time. So that
Who
was
else
like
did you think was
crazy.
as well? You mentioned another name when we spoke.
I think it was Bednar, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Elder Bednar probably enjoyed it more than any other apostle.
It was actually, okay, I'm going to tell you guys something. I haven't told you this yet, RFM.
Okay.
But my manager told me, because they had just switched around which apostles were over it, I'm pretty sure. Or like it had recently happened where they like switched out some of the apostles. And my manager was like, yeah, Elder Bednar doesn't know if this committee should exist, or like if we should be doing this stuff. He thinks it's like not something that we should be focusing on. And I'm like 95% sure it was Bednar he was talking about, which I know is crazy. Like that is not something you'd expect from him, but I think he just thought it was a waste of time. And I don't know why my manager did this, because if I was working with an apostle and he's like, I don't think we need to do this work, I would have been like, cool, I don't think so either. but my manager, like, and someone else, maybe it was the other apostle on the committee, maybe there were other committee members who felt really strongly about the existence of it. But I know that they like worked on some kind of informal proposal, or like they kind of worked to convince this apostle, and I want to say it was Bednar, that the existence of this committee was necessary. Like I am like, I remember having that conversation. So yeah. For what
as we continue on with Kate into the second aspect of working for the SCMC, which has to do with individuals of concern, we'll talk about this too. But Bill, could you possibly look up that little clip from our friend at the BBC and the interview? Because it just occurred to me that he also asked about the SCMC. And I was talking with Kate, and it was remarkable that Kate, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say this. I was telling Kate about my podcast about the SCMC, Spying for the Lord at Radio Free Mormon. And very interesting that this all seemed to be news to Kate. And by the way, that's for a reason. It's because the church tries to hide it. It was only leaked inadvertently. And then other things have happened, but most members of the church don't know about it. It's a secret. It's supposed to be a secret, obviously, since your manager is telling you not to tell anybody about it, and not even to mention the name. But it's amazing to me that you're in a confidential record. You're in a confidential area. You're now super siloed because you're doing work for the SCMC that you can't mention to people in confidential records. And you're being told that there are other divisions and other departments that you have no idea exist in the church.
Very secret.
Wow. I wonder if that shows up on any
Billy,
I won't be able to play it because we'll get a copyright strike. We've tried to do this in years past, but I'll just put up on the screen so we can talk through it.
Okay. That's Michael Purdy, right?
Yep. This is Michael Purdy. And
he's the head of PR for the Mormon Church at the time. This is back when Mitt Romney was running for president. It was part of the Mormon Moment. And Michael Purdy, no, I'm sorry. Purdy's the PR rep, right?
Yep. Purdy's the PR rep. And the guy for the BBC, and I don't know what his name is, but Sweeney. Yes, he's on the right there. And when he sits down with Purdy, he asks him directly if there is a strengthening church members committee. And Purdy like denies it, but he gets like sort of stammers and starts sweating. And he gets nervous. And then suddenly he like, I got to leave. Kind of like you did with the bishop.
Well, here's what Sweeney does. Okay, go ahead and watch it, everybody. But what Sweeney does, he denies knowing about it. And then Sweeney says, well, I've been told that there is a strengthening church members committee. And now Purdy, the church rep, crumbles. He cracks like a nut on cross-examination. And he goes, well, I don't know much about it. I'll find someone who does. Okay. And then Sweeney says, okay, let me see if I've got this right. I first asked you if you know about the Strengthening Church Members Committee? You said no. And then I asked you a second time and you said, yes, you do. And you'll find someone. And of course, he has to admit, yeah, that's what happened, because he lied about it. That was his first impulse, was to lie about the existence of the Strengthening Church Members Committee, which within 30 seconds, he admits to knowing about.
You know
And
what's
then-
so funny? Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I relate to like that uncomfortable feeling so much because I hated lying. Like Mormons have always been told not to lie. And so someone like me being told to lie, it sucks. It's not a fun feeling. It's very uncomfortable. It's like wired into us that we are not supposed to lie. So I think that's partially why he cracked so fast, is because he has like that's like the church's downfall. That's like one crack in their defenses, is like we really are told not to lie. So we have to give these half truths because it's not really a lie, but we also can't tell you the full truth because it's against policy. It's just very fascinating.
This looks like a picture of Elder Jeffrey Holland reprising the role of Ray Milland in The Lost Weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Thanks, RFM.
It is this strange thing, right? I convert at 17 years old to the only true church on the earth, led by prophets, seers, and revelators. And you have no clue how much lying and deception and encouragement to lie and obfuscate, that from the very top all the way down is just the modus operandi of the church. So I would just encourage folks, by the way, go on Google and just type in Elder Holland lying and then click videos, and it will be like 3 or 4 of the top 5 results. So folks can go look at that there.
Yep, it's turtles all the way down, and that's another hint as to what Elder Holland looks like in the still. You know, when you get a still, when you're talking, you know, and somebody just stills it, you're going to end up looking goofy 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
At least me. So
Same.
anyway, okay. So we found out we can't play that, but we do have something good to play here in a bit. Can you tell us now about the other part of your work with the Strengthening Church Members Committee involving apostates?
Yes. So I'm gonna just say stuff I really don't think I've talked about publicly. My manager gave me a flash drive, and on that flash drive was an Excel spreadsheet. And the Excel spreadsheet was labeled Individuals of Concern. That was the name of the document. And this was not about breaking laws or hurting people. It was about spiritual hurting of people, which is all bullcrap. But it was about apostates. The list had people that they considered to be engaging in apostate actions. And my manager basically told me, like, you're in charge of maintaining this list. And what that means is I didn't have authority to like find a name and like put it on there. Like I wasn't like going out and searching for people to add, but my manager was giving me information of people to add. And the list was very small, just in case anyone's wondering. It was not a huge list. Like it was maybe 15 names, maybe. And I didn't add people to that list very often. Like I want to say maybe 3 or 4 times, maybe a couple more, like 5, like the whole time that I was over that part, or the whole time I was in charge of doing that task. But like Denver Snuffer was on there, which is hilarious because he was excommunicated. John DeLynn was on there, and it's like, okay, he's also been excommunicated. Who else was on there? Oh, Mark Noggle, the attorney who does Quit Mormon. He was on that list. But again, these are all people who have been excommunicated, so it doesn't really make sense. My guess is that an apostle said, we need to figure out how to address these apostates. And someone went, whoa, we could make a list and then we can figure out how do we address each of these issues, because I think in their mind, each organization and each person, apostate person, represents a different kind of issue, right? Like Denver Snuffer, I think, wasn't part, someone forgive me if I'm like completely misconstruing this, but I think he had an issue with like priesthood authority, right? And he kind of just said, hey, the church doesn't have a right to say that they're God's church because of all these issues. But then, and I think Sam Young was added to it while I was there. he was added to that list. And I actually think, I mean, this is so obvious, right? Like, I don't have to say it out loud, but like the church was heavily involved in him being excommunicated. Like, there's just no way that there wasn't involvement from church headquarters. So yeah, I think, in fact, my memory is a little fuzzy, but I want to say he was added to the list before he was excommunicated. So it was almost like an action item of like, okay, Sam Young's doing all this stuff, but now we need to excommunicate him. And I think I did update it eventually to say that he'd been excommunicated. I don't remember for sure. So that part is a little fuzzy. So don't hold me to that. But yeah, just it was a very interesting task. My manager would send me a name. He'd tell me to look them up and just write like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of like either their blog or like any newspaper articles covering like their activism or whatever it was they were talking about. There was a lady on there. She was not very high profile, so I don't know why she was on there, but it was a lady who was like, who could communicate with the dead, and she was in her ward, like communicating with members' dead relatives.
Not
And so the
Nephi.
church, not Nephi. Oh man, she was doing ketamine and talking to Nephi. No, just like some lady with like a gift of the spirit is what it was.
You know,
At least
that sounds
that's-
almost like a Nephite city name, or it could be ketamine or ketamine IHA.
Yeah, Drew. I went forth into ketamine to speak to the people. Anyways.
Janet Russin is who RFM is speaking about, but sounds like you're talking about someone
No,
different.
it was not Janet Russin. I don't think it was.
Yeah.
It was someone not high profile at all. Just in her ward, she had offered to members like, "Hey, do you want to come to my house and I'll talk to like your dead dad or your dead mom or whoever."
Yeah.
Maybe
Were there any
though.
members on the
don't
list?
remember.
People who are still members?
Yes. I'm really hesitant to say this one, RFM, because I
Okay.
told you
Yes, you did.
you can tell Bill. I'll text Bill about it after, but I'm
Can I
really
tell Bill right
hesitant.
now?
Yeah, just tell me right now. RFM.
No,
No, okay.
I don't want this person to come under any fire. I don't want to drag them into this because they're still a member. And then there's someone I respect and admire a lot. I've had private conversations with them, and I would prefer not to say it publicly. But yes, there
This
was
is someone whose
somebody.
name everybody would know.
Yeah, you all would know this person, and they cover they do some really important work, and so it was crazy to see that name on there.
I know. It was very unusual. It's not like seeing my name on there. You'd expect to see
Yeah.
my name on there, hopefully heading the list.
They did have your name. It was Radio Free Mormon. Not just kidding.
And Bill Reel. By the way, I want to say something here that you're talking about. There's no way that the church didn't have anything to do with Sam Young's excommunication. When we were speaking, let me just go ahead and tell the audience that every time a spate of excommunications happens, and it looks like there's some kind of coordination going on at church headquarters, the church immediately comes out with official statements saying there's no coordination going on at church headquarters. Church headquarters and top leadership has nothing to do with local disciplinary matters, and all disciplinary matters basically are local disciplinary matters in the LDS Church. So we don't have anything to do with it. And it's just the Spirit of God is moving upon the local stake president or the local bishop at the same time. And all these things are happening. Now, Kate, we'll present evidence of that. I don't think you'd heard that before we spoke on the phone recently. But is that statement true?
No. So the church can't hold a disciplinary council, right? So like if the church wants to like worm its way into maybe like pretending to tell the truth, sure. Church headquarters can't hold a disciplinary council. But what church headquarters can do, and what I did, is I would send letters to stake presidents. And so the same way I would do it with newspaper clippings of, hey, your member did this thing. We highly suggest you ministering to them and doing church discipline if necessary. Same kind of thing if somebody was engaging in apostate actions. I can't remember any off the top of my head except our lovely host, Bill Reel, if we want to get into that story.
We will in just a second. We'll definitely get into Bill because that's going to be so wonderful. But
Okay.
I want to, we'll go through a couple slides first. But I wanted to ask this. Are you saying highly recommended that these letters, that you had the templates and the powers to send out, both for people who committed crimes as well as people who are guilty of apostasy or accused of apostasy, that you could send out these letters, and that they highly recommend to the stake president that they have a disciplinary proceeding for this person?
Yes. So I would send a letter saying, basically, I mean, and it looked like it was coming from the Area 70. So it looked like it was coming from the top down. And it would say, we highly recommend, like, or it didn't say highly recommend, it would just say, please take any necessary actions, including church discipline if necessary. So very strongly worded and strongly suggested that you should hold a disciplinary council for this member.
Almost like they're trying to say it without saying it.
Exactly.
And it,
So
and
they
it
can
often, it often
ahead.
comes with a phone call as well. I mean, somebody, whether it's an apostle or a 70, we have numerous instances going all the way back to you can't stage manage a grizzly bear with Elder Oaks speaking about
93.
Boyd K. Packer. But when a prominent individual is being encouraged by the local leadership to have a disciplinary council on their behalf, a 70 or an apostle reaches out to that stake president and also figuratively puts an arm around the shoulder and says, hey, we sort of need this done.
Yeah.
And that's apparently what happened with him. And what I'm gobsmacked about is that these letters that we had already intuited, but now we're having on the ground confirmation that these are letters that suggest strongly that you have a disciplinary proceeding, stake president. And it's coming, of course, at least under the auspices, under the letterhead of the Area 70. But it doesn't seem like the Area 70 is that involved. They've started
Right.
this machine, this disciplinary letter sending machine that sort of keeps running on its own.
Right. So the Area 70 wasn't even really, I mean, I'm sure there are situations where the Area 70 does get involved before the church steps in, right? Because I don't think I was involved in every case where someone was excommunicated for apostasy, right?
Mhm.
But there were definitely cases where it came from the top down. It was and the Area 70 is finding out about this as we send the letter to the stake president, right?
Right. The guy who's the middle management in between doesn't get the letter. He gets the copy of the letter that you sent,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you sent
Yeah.
under the name of.
Under the name of the Area 70. I forget which Area 70 it was at the time, but yeah, that's it. It was from me, but it was on Area 70 letterhead.
He gets a copy of a letter that's from him to the stake president.
Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing is, it's not even him getting the letter, really. It's his secretary in his office that's getting that letter. And then she's filing it away. I'm sure, like I said, for really high profile cases, I'm sure they find out about it and get more involved. But there was like a lot of, like I said, the right hand not knowing what the left hand doeth type of stuff going on.
Intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're very, very siloed. By the way, I do want to ask you, did you ever at any time meet or were introduced to any of the members of the Strengthening Church Member Committee?
No, I never knew who was on the committee. I knew my manager was involved somehow. I don't even know if he was a member of the committee or if he was just like a secretary who just passed stuff off to me. I don't know. And then I knew that the apostles obviously were involved as well. Just a couple.
Did your manager ever mention any of the names of the people on the committee?
No, and I'm sure it was very sensitive information.
When he referred to the committee, what expression did he use?
He would say SCMC or the Strengthening Church Membership Committee.
And do you remember the expression that we talked about? We almost titled the show after it because it was so haunting.
The powers that be.
That's what your manager would call them.
Yeah, we would have questions every once in a while, or like things that needed to be sent up the line. And when we got answers back, the answers would be something like, well, the powers that be said this. Like, and again, just an example of the siloing, right? Because we don't really know who they're talking to or who's giving that information. But yeah, very interesting and secretive.
It was so haunting that we almost named the episode that because it was so good. But the problem is it doesn't really say anything. You have to actually get to this point in the show, which is 2 hours in, to get it. So we called it
Right.
something a little bit more prosaic, but we're almost there. The powers that be. It sounds like a Twilight Zone episode. And it sounds like you were
Yeah.
in the Twilight Zone for 5 years.
Oh, for sure. So the powers that be really is what was giving information to my manager, like, because I never saw their faces, I didn't know who they were, and then my manager was passing that on to me to either record or to do or whatever. I almost wonder if they were trying to train me to eventually be a bigger part of the committee, because he's just giving me tiny little tasks just to see how I do. But I ended up leaving confidential records, and I went back to local unit support, actually, just because it was such a toll on my mental health to constantly be surrounded by all that kind of darkness and negativity. But anyways,
I'm sure. I was going to show a few more slides and catch us up to present. Were you ready to go back to Bill?
yes.
Okay, so let's do this. This is another email you sent on July 11th, 2017, or actually it was sent to you
Yes. It was
from
from
Bishop
a bishop.
Celestino. He's one of the local units who was asking for help.
Yes. I don't know what he was asking for help about, but we rarely got heartfelt messages like this. And not to say like anything bad about bishops, they're just really busy. So when I got this message, like, it meant a lot to me. So this shows you how seriously I took confidentiality, because I literally blacked out his email, blacked out the unit number, blacked out like all of the information that was like sensitive information, right? I even blocked out like his first name at the end. So I could hang this at my desk and no one would get mad at me to be like, hey, you have all this information just sitting out.
Okay, push pin into the cubicle wall.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
It's that same material that cubicle wall is made out of. It's the same burlap that covers all the wards in the church.
It's
I
multi-use.
I know, right?
You get it out of Burma wholesale.
Yeah. But I just wanted to show this because I don't have a lot of like memorabilia from working at the church, but I did take this picture.
I know you're humble. So can we get Bill to read this?
Sure. Yeah.
From Bishop Celestino to Kate, because he's so appreciative of
I'd
your
love
helping him with his problem.
Thank you, Kate. I have already reviewed it, submitted it to the stake president. I really appreciate your assistance with this. I know it may seem that at times you come to work every day to do something that is not significant in the great scheme of things. But as a beneficiary of your work and knowing others who also are, I can tell you the work you do impacts many lives. At the end of the day, it's more than simply work. May the Lord bless you for your striving to excel in what you do. Sincerely, Bishop Celestino.
It's very nice.
Yeah. It's so weird to talk about because like at the time that I was working there, it really impacted my life in a good way. Like I really felt like I was helping people, and I think most of the people I helped probably would still believe that I helped, and like of course my beliefs have shifted, and I don't believe that the church is a good organization, but like there are so many good people in it. And bishops I think are a huge example of that because they're kind of in the dark. Like the bishop that called to ask about this annotation on a record, right? Like and we're not giving a straight answer. I just really admire bishops, even though we don't believe the same things anymore. And I know a lot of bishops are assholes. I am not trying. If you have a vendetta against your bishop, you are so valid. But like there are so many good ones, and I really saw that. Like I cried on the phone with bishops. Who were just dealing with some really hard things, and like how can you not cry thinking about like the members that they're helping. So anyway, I just wanted to share this as like an example of what it was like to work there, because it was very meaningful for me at the time.
Very good. And here's your last day at church headquarters. Obviously, we're going to circle back to pick up Bill, but this is the last day, February 21st, 2020, right before COVID, by the way.
Yep, right before COVID, I left, and I'm not wearing
You're the one in
garments
the blue dress,
picture.
the blue and white dress.
No, I'm in the tie. I just put a globe over my face.
I know, this guy makes me feel better. I thought I had a big head.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure he was completely unidentifiable.
And that's considerate of you. Absolutely. So there's your last day. Big smile on your face. Is that just plastered on? Are you glad to be leaving or what?
Oh, I was so thrilled to be leaving. I'll just tell you guys, I had been drinking alcohol for like 6 months at this point. Not like I wasn't like an alcoholic. Like it
Well,
was
that
just like
explains the smile.
I had gotten together with my friends a couple times and had some drinks, and I was also at the time, fornicating and doing things you're not supposed to do as a member. So I was really glad to be leaving. And I remember when I was debating, do I leave the church? Do I leave church employment? That was the question. And I remember thinking, I can't sit through a temple recommend interview again because my 2 years was coming up. My temple
Oh,
recommend was expiring. And I
hmm.
could lie. Like I could have lied, but I told myself, I don't want to sit and lie. Like I want to live like my life. I want to live an authentic life. And I have to get out of church employment before May because May is when my temple recommend expired. And I didn't want to sit through an interview and lie to a leader. So that was a big reason why I left, is just so I could start living more authentically. In this picture, I'm not wearing garments. I
I
had
couldn't tell.
I always wore like clothes that you could kind of, where you can't really tell if I'm wearing garments or not, but like
Right.
I tried to still wear pretty modest clothing so that nobody would know. Um, so yeah, that's my story about kind of leaving, I guess.
So are you wearing different clothing at home during this period then?
Um,
Because
Not
you've already
really.
got all these dresses, right, for work.
I know that's the thing, is like all of my wardrobe was so Mormon centric that I just stopped wearing garments, but I wasn't wearing anything very wild like outside of that. I mean, in 2019 I did wear like a really thick spaghetti, like thick tank top on a vacation, and my mom ended up getting really mad at me for that. And so it was like the only time I had ever like posted pictures online, and like my mom was really mad that I wasn't wearing my garments in those pictures. um
So my question is, does the lace on that dress prevent that guy from doing a garment line check?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's a pretty thick fabric, so you can't really tell if I'm wearing garments or not. And I was really careful because like I kept wearing the same dresses that I had worn when I was wearing garments. So like anything that I wore to church headquarters, I already knew would cover garments, if that makes sense.
Sure. I stole the garment check line from somebody in the live chat. Okay.
Nice.
I have no shame. I'm not proud.
Hey, that's
Let's go,
okay.
let's go to the next line. Oh, and this is something you received the day that you left on
My exit.
2/21/20.
Mm-hmm.
After 5.5 years, this is what you posted at Poetic Kate. Today is my last day as an employee at church headquarters. And it says, Kate, thank you for your time as an employee of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Your service is appreciated. We are always trying to improve the employee experience and workplace environment and would like your feedback about your experience in church employment. Please complete a short exit survey using the link below. And there's the link, take the survey. Your feedback will be shared with the Human Resources Department and management to improve, et cetera, et cetera. And it's signed PS. This is not a form letter. This is the personal touch.
Yeah, it's very personal, as you can tell.
Do they have a party for you?
Not really.
Oh,
But I mean, a lot of people were like very supportive, and I can't emphasize enough, like there are some good people working there who I don't want to speak for their journey and say that they are bad people, because like I just saw some of the good. I really did. I don't think the organization as a whole is a good organization, but I can speak very highly of some of the people I worked with, and I could tell that they were going to miss me, and I
mm.
miss them, to be honest. Like I left the church pretty publicly after that, and I haven't stayed in touch with a lot of them, but very good people. Like I would say more good than bad for sure. And I mean, I don't have good things to say about the apostles. I don't have good things to say about a lot of what the church does, but I can tell you that like the people I worked with, like I really think have their hearts in the right place. And I can't judge them because I've been there, you know? Like, I think it's really easy to fling mud. But because I used to work for the church and like I've been on the journey, it's really hard for me to speak ill of them because I know what it's like.
Yeah.
And I hope that they find their way out eventually. People make a lot of money and they have really good insurance benefits. So I think a lot of people are scared to leave once they go through a faith crisis. I think there are probably more physically in, mentally out people there than we realize. But because the insurance benefits are so good and the 401k benefits are so good and they're supporting families, like I didn't have a family to support. But because they're supporting their families, like it's very hard to transition out of church employment once you're entrenched in it.
Okay. Well, we're coming around the clubhouse turn here, Kate. Oh, here we've got it. Okay, we've got the soundbite. This was back when John Dehlin and Kate Kelly were both getting excommunication or disciplinary notices delivered to them by two men in conservative suits. Not the same men, I think. And Kate Kelly's may have been certified male because she had moved from Virginia or wherever it was back then. But they both got the notices right, which raised the question, is the church at the top levels, in Salt Lake, in other words, coordinating this? Are they involved? And the reason why it becomes a question is because the church issues statements saying, we're not involved. We're not about this. And Doug Fabrizio now on his program, Radio West, it was June 16th, 2014, that this was happening. They get an official spokesperson for the church, Ali Isom, to come on the show and answer questions. Now, she says, I don't want people calling in. That was one of her conditions. That's at the beginning. And we're going to play a snippet from it. It starts at timestamp 20:28. And Doug Fabrizio is going to ask her the question, is the church involved at top levels in orchestrating this? And I want you to go ahead and listen to Ali Isom and her response. And then I'll be asking you, Kate, if Ali's telling the truth.
Conversations, really meaningful, really important, really valuable conversations.
So the tone's important, the way you
Very
present
much
it.
so.
Here we go.
I wanted to ask you about this question, and this is a big one, obviously. And the question is, who's directing all of this? Who's directing? The church statement is very clear. It says local leaders have the
Absolutely.
responsibility to clarify false teachings and prevent other members from being misled. Decisions, still quoting here, are made by local leaders and not directed or coordinated by church headquarters. So the letter that Kate Kelly received, the letter that John Dehlin received, letters, I should say, were not directed by church leaders at the headquarters in Salt Lake City.
No, the determination around
We can stop
actions,
there.
process,
Everything
timing.
else is BS. Everything else is BS. And we'll play a little bit more of it just so you can see how she tries to distract from the question and give a speech, right? Instead of just answer. She answered the question. The answer to her question is no. The question could not be clearer. The response could not be clearer. Is that true, what Ali Isom said, Kate?
I mean, no. Especially the part where she's like, it's not coordinated by headquarters. I'm like, well, what do you mean it's not coordinated by headquarters? If we're sending letters to their bishops and stake presidents, like, what do you
Right.
mean?
But
Like-
we don't know that. I don't know that. Bill Reel doesn't know that.
I know.
Doug Fabrizio doesn't know this. Only people who have been in your position and gotten that deep inside the beast know that that's what happens, and that Ali Isom is saying something that's flatly not true.
Yeah, and like I honestly wonder, RFM, I don't know how much communication there is between confidential records and the PR department. So it is possible that Ali is not aware that there is that kind of communication going out. But again, it's the siloed stuff so that people can lie on behalf of the church without knowing that they're lying.
By the
So-
way,
Yeah.
Allie's PR, her job is to present the entity's voice in answering questions. She gets prepped in whatever way she gets prepped, but the system and its leaders tell her how to craft the answers. The PR department gets feedback from the church leaders and crafts the answers to these questions. Allie doesn't know shit about how Mormonism's ran other than what people tell her. And so she is just the person who's able to, their brain works fast. They can come up with the answer that they've been trained to give, and they can articulate it in a quality way so that it presents a great voice for the public relations side of the church. Her answer came from somewhere. It didn't come from the recesses of her mind.
Right. She didn't make that up.
Not originally. No.
Because it's a church statement, right? Obviously, she's got to follow the church statement. And that's why I try to be careful in framing my question both times as saying, is what she said true?
No.
As opposed to, is she lying?
Right. Is what she said true? No, it's not. Like, and again, it's a half truth in the sense that church headquarters can't hold a disciplinary council, right? Like, we can't do that, but they can send a letter, a strongly worded letter to a stake president who wants to do good by the church, who wants to obey his leaders, and say, hey, you better hold a council for this guy or for this person, right?
Right. And in the interest of fairness, I want to play a little bit more, maybe a couple minutes, but because she does such a song and dance, and she actually tries to, I think she makes it worse, actually. But she knows she doesn't want to leave it with no. Now, that's significant, okay? That's significant. The answer is no. If that's a satisfactory answer and you think it's okay to just say no, why don't you just say no? Why do you start trying to add all this information to make it sound like it's not just such an abrupt no? And she'll give examples of things that don't apply to the question as if they do apply to the question. In other words, she'll talk about, well, all the local leaders, they get all the training on discipline. No, that's not what we're talking about, Allie. And you know it. That wasn't the question. It's about our specific people designated by top leadership in Salt Lake City for disciplinary action. That's the question. And she will give all this information. She'll deluge us with information that is irrelevant to the question asked.
I tried to back it up a little bit just so we could hear that no and then him follow up. I'm not sure if I got it right, so please correct me if it's not in the right place.
Is that there is no information provided from church headquarters. The information that they receive is standard leadership training that all leaders throughout the world receive.
Can you go back a little bit further? Because that glorious no rings in the ears. I want to hear those bells again.
Made at the discretion of the local congregant leader, the bishop or the stake president.
And they haven't heard from headquarters before they sent those letters related to disciplinary measures. That was completely. You're not saying that they just.
Let me give you a little context around it, because what I'm not saying is that there is no information provided from church headquarters. The information that they receive is standard leadership training that all leaders throughout the world receive as to process or how to conduct their stewardship. It is just more of a technical direction and guidance, but the individual determinations are made by that bishop or stake president. I can tell you in one of these instances where there was the assertion from one of the congregants that they were unable to attend the specified time. The question did come back to church headquarters. Could we make any adjustment? Can we adjust timing? What are my options there? And they were told that they could do it by phone, and they were even offered a video conferencing capacity that would be secure and confidential as well. That flexibility is within protocol, and it's sort of those kind of process and protocol questions that there is some conversation back and forth. Necessarily so. This is a highly sensitive matter.
Of course. But you know what's out there. You know out there that people are saying this is the church is starting not a conspiracy. It's a purge. Yeah. That you've got people, the church, they're pushing a little. Kate Kelly's pushing too hard. John Dolin's pushing. They're not the only ones. There are a number of them who have in the Mormon blogosphere. You may or may not be familiar with it. That are raising, questions that are often
more
critical.
familiar these days than I used to.
I'll bet.
The church
is like, all right, we're done. We've had enough of this. We need to throw a brushback pitch. They're crowding the plate. We need to get them back in line, and that's the sense of it. And on the church website, there's a reference to a leadership training conference. Elder M. Russell
We
Ballard,
can stop this if we want at this point. You can go back and listen to it. It's on Radio West in the archives. It's great. But the thing is this, he's going to go on and talk. Look, Allie is not just parroting the church line as a spokesperson. She is shucking and jiving, and she is moving, and she is trying to not come to a stop at the end of the sentence. There's no periods. She's not allowing Doug to insert a question. She keeps trying to move it further and further away from what it is he's talking about. But her first answer stands, and she said nothing to contradict it, which is that she said the church and the highest church authorities in Salt Lake City are not, she said, no, they're not involved in these local disciplinary proceedings or instituting them or suggesting them. They're not involved in any way. What did you think of the rest of her answer? Kate, you were sitting there shaking your head.
I mean, it's just so much of a half truth, right? Like the thing I keep coming back to of just the church can't hold disciplinary councils. So yeah, technically, it just makes me so mad because like technically, yeah, it's up to the bishop or the stake president, right? When they're holding the council, like the church isn't pushing like, oh, like you have to hold the council, but also apostasy is an excommunicable defense or offense, right? Like somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but in the handbook, that is one where if you are engaged in apostasy over and over again, and there's a pattern of it, the only outcome is excommunication. You cannot disfellowship somebody for that. Or maybe you can. Maybe it has to result in either disfellowshipment or excommunication. Somebody can correct me if you have access to the handbook, but it's not like they can just hold account. Like you're required to hold a council when somebody's doing apostasy. Required. So the church, when they send these messages saying, hey, your member's doing apostasy, they are telling you to hold a council. Duh. And so it is coordinated by church headquarters in the sense that the church is nudging the leaders along and saying, hey, they're doing an apostasy over here. Like, you got to hold a council, and the outcome has to be either disfellowshipment or excommunication. And most of the time, I would say it's excommunication.
What would be the entire point of the SCMC, of the Strengthening Church Members Committee, if these decisions were solely local? It would not need to exist.
Right. And I think they think they're just helping the bishop out because maybe the bishop doesn't know about these situations. But it goes to show though, like how much the church cares about their image, about members falling in line and complying, because when they see members that aren't complying anymore, I mean, they come down pretty hard.
Yeah. Don't they, Bill?
Yeah, I was going to add something. I know we're going to get into the part you played in regards to me, but this fits so well here, so I want to say it. When my stake president was getting ready, so me and the stake president who held my disciplinary council, we had a common friend, a common person that loved both of us, respected both of us, and had deep friendships with both of us. It was relayed to me by that friend that my stake president at the time, who was just a few days away from having the disciplinary court, was bedridden in angst from knowing that he was going to have to excommunicate me.
Oh, wow.
Because the story I'm telling, because I'm putting them against their own theology. You will, by your own terms, you will sever my eternal family. You will make it so that I can't get to the celestial kingdom with my spouse and my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that weighed on him so much that he was feeling so much angst that he was bedridden. Now, you don't feel that if the disciplinary council is really up to you and you don't want to do it. You only feel that kind of angst when you've been told what it is that you need to do, number one. Mm-hmm. Number two is that in the disciplinary court itself, he makes the reference, you cannot say that an apostle lied. And I stated, even if he lied, you can't call him a liar. And I said, even if he lied, and his statement is, even if he lied, the rule has already been given to him. He's not the one in the middle of a disciplinary court deciding, you know what, I don't think Bill can call him a liar, because my stake president agreed based on the data Elder Holland had lied.
Right.
He went into that disciplinary court going, you can't do that because someone else has told me. That's two. And then the third one,
Right.
that he notified me. He said, look, I've got people calling me. By the
The
way,
stake president?
yep. And by the way, that stake president is now a 70. You can look him up. 70. It is, I'm trying to think what his first name is, but his last name is Carnivale. So like carnival with an E on the end. He notified me, Bill, they're telling me. And remember, I wrote out like 5 really good questions, well articulated, that I knew the church couldn't answer. And I said, go get these answers, get answers to these questions. And then I'll know that these guys can solve the problems. And he came back and said, they will not answer your questions. And they are telling me I have to have a disciplinary court. And it was just obvious along the way that he didn't have any other outcome choices. His only outcome was to get rid of me.
Yeah.
They know. And then they don't tell the truth about it. They lie to their members.
That's it, by the way.
And this is
Emerson
just one of many, many ways that the leaders of the church lie to their members. And it's documented. We've documented it here tonight. This is Exhibit A. And there's a lot of other exhibits to follow. There's a lot of smoking guns on this range of the church lying to its members. It's really tragic. It's unfortunate. It's terrible. But they do it all the time. It's almost like the members are not as important to them as the image of the church, Bill.
Yeah. And my stake president in Ohio, like me moving to Southern Utah was last minute. It was sort of, I went on a trip. I came back. I think I'd just been released maybe as the ward mission leader. I was active in the ward, temple recommend, all the things. And my stake president in Ohio was called to be a 70 just as I'm last minute taking a job opportunity and saying I'm going to move to Southern Utah. So that had already been in the works. I don't know. It's a strange thing that the stake president in Ohio that was my stake president became a 70, and the stake president who disciplined me out here in Southern Utah is a 70. It's a strange thing. Anyway, I'll just note that there's no obvious conclusion to draw there other than I'm going to interject that it seems like on some level the church rewarded the guy who got rid of me, and the guy that they wanted to sort of take the steps in Ohio, he was made to be a 70 as well. And I think that's sort of strange for a coincidence, but maybe not.
Well, not that many people compared to the number of members of the church become general authorities.
No.
I'll just observe that. I also want to observe something else. Now, Allie Isom, I don't know her. I'm not making any allegations, and I don't think I made my point as clear before as I might have. But when she answers the question and says no, if she's just parroting the company line, that's the end of the answer. The fact that she goes on with all these tactics in order to avoid answering the question makes it look like she knows that what she's saying is not true.
It's the Mormon thing, man. It's the Mormon thing, because like you feel so uncomfortable with just saying no because you know that's not the full answer. But then you're also like in your head juggling all of these different policies and sensitive things that you're not supposed to say directly. And so she's trying to find a way to dance around it and still tell like a half truth. I do not envy the church PR people that have to do that. Because like, again, your employment is held over your head. Like if you start talking about stuff you're not supposed to talk about. So it's rough. It's not fun. But yes, they encourage people to lie.
I had put this slide together. It was very controversial times for those of you who recall. The church had put out a statement, and then there's a statement the church puts out in response to the backlash over all the publicity about these letters being sent to Kate Kelly and John DeLynn. And this was an official church statement from spokesperson Jessica Moody. And the first part I have in really small writing. The part I'm focusing on is the part that's in yellow. It would be completely inappropriate for me to comment on any of the individual cases you've heard about recently, as those are personal matters dealt with at a local level. Yeah, we know that. But I can provide some principles. In dealing with all of these issues and questions, a local lay leader is the one who determines how they apply to those he serves. If he becomes troubled by a member's actions, he can rely on his own spiritual insights, personal prayer, guidance from handbooks, and his training to determine how best to address the member's circumstances. Nothing about letters from Salt Lake. For instance, their standard procedural handbook says, local presiding officers should not expect general authorities to tell them how to decide difficult matters. Decisions on church discipline are within the discretion and authority of local presiding officers as they prayerfully seek guidance from the Lord. Now, on the one hand, you can see how that sounds like the leaders in Salt Lake have nothing to do with it. But when you know what's going on and the template for the letters that you sent and you've described to us, Kate, you can see how that can be true, even compared with this very carefully worded denial in the church's statement that I just read.
Mm-hmm. Something that really stands out to me about this is that it says, like, if he becomes troubled by a member's actions, when it's like, no, no, no. Sometimes it's the other way around. The church becomes troubled by a member's actions and prompts the stake president to take action. And I think the church can do a lot of plausible deniability by just saying, well, we're just encouraging them in as far as like the policies go, right? Because like I said, if someone's doing apostasy, you have to hold a council based on like the handbook, right?
Mhm.
But it maybe if the bishop or the stake president never finds out that you're doing apostasy, you can just stay in the church, you know? And so it's like such a crafty, manipulative way of saying like, well, we don't have any involvement. It's just what the bishop decides. And it's like, well, no, like if someone's doing apostasy, you have to hold a council, and most of the time you excommunicate them. That's just the way it is. And the church is reminding stake presidents of this and really pushing for that.
And you know, it occurs to me that part and parcel of all of this is probably keeping intact the secrecy of the existence of the SCMC.
Oh, for sure.
Because if you start doing it in a different way, then you're going to be broadcasting to stake presidents, to bishops at least, the existence of the SCMC and what it is that they're up to. They must know that, though, when they get a file full of stuff that's highlighted, like maybe, I don't know. Have you ever seen a picture of this man before, Kate? The one on the left?
I have. So once upon a time, I was sitting at my desk in confidential records, and my manager told me to, well, the name Bill Reel came up, and I don't remember exactly how it happened, but basically my manager said, this guy is on Facebook. That's where it came from. That they didn't even mention the podcast. They just said, this guy is on Facebook sharing images that show that Jeffrey R. Holland is a liar. And he said, I need you to print out this picture and also, you know, the regular letter that you would send to the stake president. And we need to tell the stake president like that this guy probably needs to have a disciplinary council. And so I printed out the picture, the liar and the liar picture, and I got it ready, and I showed it to my manager, and he said, "Oh, you printed it in black and white." He's like, "I actually want that in color." He's like, "I want the stake president to see the red lettering stamped across his face." And he's an interesting guy, but he was like, "Yeah, I want it like in his face, you know, like that he's saying that Jeffrey R. Holland is a liar. Like he can't be doing that, you know?" And so I printed it in color. What was that?
Even if he lied, like you can't call an apostle a liar, even if he lies.
And Bill's stake president agreed that Jeffrey R. Holland had lied.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I mean, I think it was the boldness with which you were saying it. I remember my manager was just like, members cannot just be out here saying he's a liar. And I know a really big part of this, Bill, is you had a number of Facebook followers at the time. And I think that's what like my manager was like most concerned about, is he's like, listen, he has a big following of people. He's saying that this apostle is lying, and that we can't have that happening. Like a member can't be doing that. So anyways, I ended up printing it again in color, and I sent it to your stake president, Bill. And it's so crazy because like I didn't even remember really that had ever happened. Because again, 40 hours a week in confidential records, this maybe was like 30 minutes of my day, maybe an hour of my day. And then I never remembered your name again until I saw Rob, who was on your show recently. he talked about
Cultural
Bill.
Hall.
What was that?
Cultural Hall.
Cultural Hall. Yes. Yes. He mentioned Bill Reel, and I said, "Oh, I remember that name, and I remember exactly what I was doing with Bill." Like it all came back to me at once, where I was like, "Oh my gosh, I had to print that picture of Jeffrey R. Holland," and like I immediately Googled or like looked you up, Bill, just to make sure I wasn't crazy, because I was like, "Am I remembering this wrong?" But no, I found the Jeffrey R. Holland picture. I saw your name again, and I was like, "This is it. This was the guy," and it all came flooding back to me. Anyways, so that I wasn't heavily involved in your case, if that makes sense. All I did was send that off, and then your stake presidents did what they
All you did was send the stake
after that.
president a letter suggesting strongly church discipline along with the smoking gun and let nature take its course. Is that right?
Yeah. And I mean, and that I acknowledge I had a huge role in it in that way. So I am sorry, Bill, for what you went through, and that you had to be kind of humiliated by church leaders, even though you knew you were right. Like, that's a horrible situation to be in. So I'm really sorry you went through that.
FYI, the church has never humiliated me, because one has to feel humiliated for it to happen. And when you recognize that this man on the screen, Elder Holland, in fact, you can't excuse it. He is being deceptive with Sweeney. He is lying about 1 red cent to Prop 8, not 1 red cent. He is lying when he tells the story that's been told over and over again by a group of these general authorities about the missionary going on a mission and meeting his brother on the mission. And then the last one, I'm trying to remember what the last one. Oh, it's the
one I brought to your attention.
Mitt Romney Sweeney conversation.
No, you mentioned that one. The one about double-digit stakes.
Oh, double-digit stakes every week of the church is creating double-digit stakes every week of our life. It might be 8 this week. It might be, who knows? But
12 next week. But it's basically right around double digits every week.
Meanwhile, it's 1.2 stakes per week at the time. It wasn't double-digit unless you're counting to the right of the decimal. And Elder Holland, that would be really bad math for a guy who's gone to a good school and read a few good books. So,
wow,
it's sort of insane.
Yeah,
His thing builds walls around its leaders. Elder Oaks with that smirk. It's wrong to criticize leaders, even if the criticism is true. And he's got this smirky smile on his face as it's happening.
I know.
Can I tell you, I think we have a very special moment here tonight, because we've got a person who used to work for the SCMC who is directly responsible for Bill Reel getting excommunicated. And now I feel like I'm bringing you two together like Sinatra brought together Martin and Lewis.
Yeah. And you played a part too, RFM, because then you covered the audio recording of the disciplinary court. And so the three of us are sort of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon with just 1 degree in each direction. So,
okay, you want to know something crazy that we found out today when we were talking today? We talked on the phone a couple of times in preparation for the show. But I was talking with Kate. I had the conversation, of course, with Timothy J. Dykes, D-Y-C-H-E-S, who was the head guy under the apostles. The apostles are there, just figureheads. But the head guy was Timothy J. Dykes, who was a 70 for the LDS Church. And I know he's on the committee for the Strengthening Church Members Committee. I called the guy. I had a conversation with him. This is several years ago. I do an episode about it. It's called Spying for the Lord. And the crazy thing is, Kate doesn't know this guy, doesn't know he's on the Strengthening Church Members Committee. I'm crazy, Radio Free Mormon. I know the guy who's in charge of the committee. Kate doesn't know, and she's doing work for him in the church office building or the admin building.
Yeah,
is that crazy?
Yeah, it's nuts.
Strikes me as crazy. All right, now we're closing up here. Kate, do you have anything you want to say in closing, and also to promote your stuff? And we'll usually take a few phone calls. Is that okay? I know we're at almost 2 hours and 40 minutes. Can we take maybe 3 quick phone calls? I know a lot of people want to ask questions.
So I need to interject. So I need to tell a story because I just thought of it tonight, and it's a crazy story. RFM, when we've gone to Sunstone, you and I have enjoyed the company of other people, other well-known content creators in this space. In the Little America, I believe it was, where we had a dinner.
Yes, that was a while ago.
And I don't know if you were at the one that you and I shared a Sunstone together. We went to dinner with a bunch of well-known, like other content creators and authors, scholars, that kind of thing. Were you at the one when the law enforcement person? Yeah,
that was Little America.
Great. So you can at least honor that this was said. And if anybody wants to ask, you can ask Anthony Miller as well.
I didn't look for this guy's credentials or his identification or anything, but other than that, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's okay, because I can back this up and I can explain why. So there is an individual who works in the law enforcement community. I met with him about a year before you and I had this conversation with him. I met with him, and I met with him with my good friend Chris Bloxam, and we went to the law enforcement agency. I walk into the front door, have to pass security guards, go through metal detectors, and it is obvious that whether this guy's telling the truth or not, this guy has the credentials to be telling the truth. He works for the law enforcement agency. Chris Bloxam and I are escorted upstairs to this person's office, and we sit down with him. I won't, and again, I'm not going to give any identifying information. People can guess who this is or whatever, but I promise not to say anything about who it was. He reported to me, to Chris Bloxam, and on other occasions to other folks, including Anthony Miller. And Anthony's as honest as the day is long. You can ask Anthony if this story's true. He informed us and informed you on this other occasion that he was in the process of getting an opportunity to work for the church. They didn't want to tell him everything, but he said, I'm not even going to entertain this job unless I get more information. He has the credentials. He works in law enforcement. He's the perfect guy for the job.
It's coming back to me, Bill.
Yeah. And so they say, well, fine, you're going to need to sign something that you're not going to say. He said, I'm not signing jack squat. I'm not signing anything. You want me, you're going to tell me what's going on. Otherwise, I'll just walk out of here. He reports that he is brought into a meeting that includes higher folks in the church. And what the job opportunity that he has an opportunity to accept is to go undercover, to go into wards where dissidents are going to church, and to present himself as he's a new member in the ward and to buddy up with the dissident.
No way.
Oh yeah, no. Again, once you understand the Pasco Wellington and all that stuff, it's only the tiniest little jump to do this next thing.
Yeah, to go from virtual to actual.
And when you said there's other groups above, and if you play your cards right, Kate, you could work for these other groups. It reminds me that if there are more than one group above where you're at, SCMC and something else plus. So this person reported to me and Chris, and again to you and Anthony and other folks on other occasions, that he was being offered the opportunity to go into wards. And he said it had already been done. They had already sent someone into Mike Norton, new name Noah's ward, and had that person present themselves as a ward member, buddy up to Mike Norton, and try to get whatever information they could get from him. And sort of present yourself like a friend and try to figure out, like, hey, what are you working on next? What are you going to poke at the church? And how are you going to do this thing? And the reason they gave for this was new name Noah got to the point where he was creating fake temple recommends for people to go to the temple. And the church went out and spent $3 million or something to update their entire system so that it now had to have a barcode on it and be scanned. So rather than just an old 80-year-old man in a white suit looking at it and going, it looks good to me. Go ahead, kid. Now it had a barcode and you could scan it, and they could get like a thing would come up on the screen that would say, hey, you're from this ward, you're from this stake, and it matches, all this stuff looks good, you're good to go. But then Mike, what the church didn't know was that Mike worked in an industry where he was in charge of creating barcodes. So he kept on creating temple recommends by just making his own barcodes for people that would pass the barcode test, and people could still go to the temple to see their kid get married when they didn't have a current temple recommend.
That's actually incredible. That's so funny.
The church realized that it could have saved millions of dollars and paid somebody $20,000 to do a 2-month stint and buddy up with somebody in a ward. So this guy had the chance to take the job. He declined it, didn't take it.
You know how crazy this sounds? Like if I had been if I was a true blue member of the church and I was hearing this for the first time, like this whole episode, I would be like, there's no way. Like these are conspiracies. But like that's how crazy and like that's how secretive it all is. And like they kind of know how bad it sounds. That's why they have to keep it so secret, because that sounds insane. Like you sound like the mafia. It's not that serious, you know?
Anyone who does this work, this guy got through the NDA because of his qualifications. But if he would have taken the job, he would have had to have signed one. And he said, anyone who does this work has to sign an NDA. They can never speak about it. But this is what the church does. And so when I go like, this isn't that far from Scientology, it's not that far from Scientology.
Right.
Can I just say, I for one am glad to hear about this program, because I think it explains the only reason I have any friends.
Yeah, you're gonna find out later, RFM. We're all just buddying up to you so we can get the dirt.
By the way, when you came on board to Mormon Discussion, RFM, to do your podcast, I knowing sort of some of these things, I was hesitant to even sort of buddy up with you because I have no idea who.
This is fun. I've never heard this before.
Yeah, I'm
Go
always.
on, please. You were worried about buddying up with me?
Any person who comes into my world, I'm skeptical of, because I know this shit is real. This is a church that had Danites. This is a church that had whistling whittlers. This is a church whose prophet said they should stick javelins through people's hearts. Mountain Meadows Massacre. It's within the realm of crazy. This thing has $265 billion. Now, at this point, I don't think they'll do anything crazy because they the risk of getting caught and what things would come from that way worse than doing this kind of stuff. But
they do seem to suffer from the issue of, well, I've had a lot of clients who suffer from the same issue, which is thinking they're never going to get caught.
Yeah. But the church
does a lot of bad stuff, still thinking they never get caught. And I don't think the CES fiasco really was a wake-up call for them. I'm sorry, Kate, yes?
Oh, sorry. I just had I had a comment just about so I think one of the reasons they want to buddy up to people is they like to kind of do PR stunts before things blow up too much. I heard once while I was working in confidential records, there was like a big group of like doomsdayers in the church who were like all about preparedness and stuff. And I think one of them was actually on the individuals of concern list, not as an apostate, but just as like, hey, they're saying some really weird, out there, wacky stuff that makes the church look bad. And if I remember correctly, like instead of like holding a council or anything, what they ended up doing is they published something in the church magazines that was like very critical of being a doomsdayer. Like, sure, preparedness is important, but remember, like if you're acting out of fear, like you're not in line with the Lord or whatever. So like I just want to say I did hear that the church does respond to some of these ideas through their magazines, through their publications. Like they're very selective in what they say, because sometimes they are responding to big public things that are happening either culturally or in the news. And it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence when they release these statements or when they publish certain things.
Yeah, I just want to correct something, because Bill, I may have said the CES fiasco. If I did, I meant the SEC fiasco. Okay. That's what I meant to. Obviously, the CES fiasco is Austin 5 slide on truth letter. That's what the CES fiasco is.
I just want to note, by the way, notice this comment. Conan, I'd love to know more. Conan the librarian, maybe you're just pointing to sort of as a funny way, pointing to the Richard Nygren episode. But Mike Parker, who lives in Hurricane, Utah,
and came into the pawn shop,
is the creator of Richard Nygren, the first Black apologist. I would highly suggest going back and watching that episode, and you can see Stephen Smoot and Daniel Peterson, Mike Parker, and what's the heavy set guy.
Boylan?
Robert Boylan.
Robert Boyle on my ass.
Yeah, Robert Boylan. And those 4 apologists creating this mass deception behind the scenes, creating a fictional African-American apologist named Richard Nygren.
From the Deep South.
Crazy.
He lived in Mississippi or someplace.
Steve Pinecker and I broke that story, and we had all the receipts to show it. It was a fun one to do.
You were all over that. Like buzzards on a gut wagon.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say here, and then we'll finish up to the show. And I'll put the banner up. By the way, let me hit the call-in studio. Let me start the show, the call-in part of the show. And so the thing is open. You can make the phone call. I'll put the banner up on the screen. That's up there now, 662-667-6667. And then also in the comments, I'll put the link that you can join us in the studio if you want to ask your question that way. I'll just note, by the way, what's the dog's name?
My dog's getting mad at me. He's
what's
like,
the dog's
what are you
name?
doing for so long? Come here.
What's the dog's name, Caitlin?
His name's Oliver.
Oliver, cool. Up on the screen right now, and I, at the time, this was posted on Reddit, but I actually was able to find the job application. It's a real thing. The church didn't want to say SCMC, so they called it, I don't know if you ever heard it called this, Caitlin, but I'll, right about where my cursor is, see that? The social listening, and they called it up above, the social listening team. Did you ever hear the phrase social listening team?
No, never.
Yeah, this is another name that the SCMC goes by because it sounds more nothing. But if you read what the job description is, it's, we want you to spy on people.
Wow.
So when the SCMC is hiring, the entity is so secret that they even change the name of the group so that they don't have to say SCMC. It's the social listening team.
You know, the social listening team may just be a group within the group of the SCMC. The ones who are doing the monitoring, the active spying, as opposed to the administrative tasks.
Yeah.
We're sitting around on the committee and talking about this list of individuals of concern.
So there's that. Anyway.
Interesting. Okay, so that's it. Now, I don't think we got to the part where you promote yourself there.
Me?
Where can we go to find out more about you, Kate?
I'm on every social media platform as Poetic Kate, one word. I also have a fundraising campaign for a short film that I wrote. It's a pro-choice comedy. We actually have, we've exceeded our goal, but it's really expensive to make a short film. So if you donate $10, I actually have like a 77-page memoir of my time as a church employee. And I will send you a copy of that if you donate $10. It's listed as a perk on the Indiegogo site. But yeah, you can find that Poetic Kate, any social media platform. The link in my bio should be directly for that Indiegogo page. And one of the perks is you get a copy of my memoir. So
did you write this play?
I wrote this short film, yes.
Oh my gosh. The screenplay.
Yeah, I wrote a feature-length version of it, and I also wrote this short film version of it, and we're trying to get it made. It's a comedy. So after I left Mormonism, I just leaned really hard into being an artist. That's what I've always wanted to do. So I'm a writer, I'm an actor, I'm a producer, I'm producing this, but it's been entirely funded by like my online community and people I know in real life who just support the arts. So we're really thrilled with how well it's done.
That's very impressive, and I'm glad it's fully funded. $10 donation will get you a memoir of what we've been talking about tonight. More detailed from Kate. So Kate, are you ready to take some calls? By the way, just so everybody knows, we may be a little bit itchy on the trigger finger when it comes to dumping calls if it sounds like they're going to be hostile toward Kate, because apparently, I mean, for obvious reasons, right? If you've been watching the show tonight, she's come under fire from some quarters, and we're not going to brook any of that nonsense on this show. So that's just a warning in advance.
I know
the person that I think is probably going to be the chief offender. Is that Colch down there?
It is. Let's bring Colch onto the show. Colch,
don't make us dump you, Colch.
Yeah.
We're going to dump you.
What's up? What's up?
Hey.
How's everybody doing? Hey, Kate.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Good.
Gonna pat myself on the back. I kind of set this up if people didn't.
I know. You're going to pull a Steve Pinecker, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're going to pull a Pinecker on us. You're responsible for Kate.
You know a lot of this stuff, but I bet
discovered it.
Say that one more time, Bill.
I said, you know, Kate, you know the story behind what she's talking about tonight. And yet I bet in the whole course of the conversation tonight, there are moments that even you were surprised by.
Oh, dude, almost everything. Almost
Yeah.
everything was surprising to me.
Yeah.
It was great. This was a great
Not a
episode.
call.
It's
Not a
just,
call.
yeah, yeah. It's just great to like see the curtain pulled back and to see what's going on behind the scenes. And so that was awesome for Kate to spill the beans. And Kate, thank you so much. You've always been my homie over on Twitter. Me and Kate have been through some shit over there. So
We
so
have
we're
been. That's
buddies.
why I was like really nervous to take calls. I'm like, oh, if some people call, I'm not going to say anything. We just have to hang up. But
What kind of
I'm glad
stuff's
you
been going
called.
on over on Twitter?
What was that?
We've just had some haters. We've had some haters on
Who
Twitter.
was the
They're
worst
a little.
hater?
I don't want to
Crazy
talk about
people?
our worst hater. I
Okay.
really don't. I almost filed a restraining order. It was really bad. So I will
Wow.
just say we've had like just some really terrible people, white supremacists, misogynists, violent, like recorded instances of them threatening people. So just really scary, not fun things. So that's why
Wow.
I was
Yeah.
nervous.
Okay.
It's a great
Well, I'm glad
place,
you're the
that
first one
Twitter.
up, Cultural Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. Well, I just wanted to say hi and good job, Kate. And you guys can let me go and have a good night.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Coach. You're
much.
the
And thanks for
best.
staying up late there on the East Coast.
You know it, man.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You know, my favorite thing from Colch
What?
is there's a song that he did that's like, this is the story of a guy who something and told a big lie. And it's like all about Joseph Smith. It's like a parody song. It's really funny.
He's so good
And
at his
it's like,
parody songs.
he didn't look so good in something, but so he started a religion, then he died. It's so funny. I butchered it, but Colt, I love that song and I sing it to myself a lot. It's great.
It's in the new primary songbook.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. We do have a caller. There are two call. We would be happy to take another phone call. So the call lines are open if somebody does want to call in, 662-667-6667. But I do think I've got a Landon. So let me see. And it's
Oh,
not.
that's
it's
my brother.
Whitaker's.
Don't put him on.
Oh, I got you. Let's.
Especially
Oh,
this
no.
Landon broken.
I am a different Landon.
Okay.
Yep, I am a different Landon, I promise.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, Landon.
Definitely not. No, it's all good. Definitely not your brother. And I think it was kind of a douchey move of him to be doing that comment earlier. But anyways, I love Kate. I even follow her on, I follow Poetic Kate on Facebook or Instagram. And I think the perfect word for her is confident. I think all of her posts just scream of confidence, which is awesome.
Thank you.
I think my question, of course, my question, so similar to RFM as an attorney, when you're doing your job, for example, I don't think you maybe didn't believe that Mr. Oakes was innocent, but you were doing your job, similar to how Kate's doing her job, or someone for Kurt and McConkie doing their job. I think people remain in their jobs not really believing in what the end goal is or what they're doing, but that's their job and that's what they're there to do. And I think that that Kate was courageous enough to officially resign and take her records off the church books. And just playing devil's advocate with you, RFM, because you and I are in the same boat here. So
You're a lawyer?
Don't think I'm like being. No. It's the same boat as in you and I are still officially on the church records.
Hmm.
And why is that? I think the answer I've heard you give in the past was that you want to make it hard for the church.
I think I put it this way,
you.
because it's not my job to make it easy for them to get rid of me. That's not my job. I have no intention of making it easy for them. If they want me off the records of the church, they're going to have to come and get me. But they know where I live, and I'll leave the light on.
But we are also adding to the number at every general conference.
Can I tell you something?
How
Whether my name's on the records or not is not going to keep the church from lying about how many members they have.
For sure.
Boom, baby. Boom, baby. Do you have any
that.
other objections?
No, I just like I am wanting to be confident myself in doing that. I just need. I mean, maybe Kate, you can tell me your story why you made that choice.
Okay.
So I want to say I always support wherever people are at, right? I would never, it's such a personal decision. I would never say that somebody is in the wrong for leaving or for staying. My reasoning was a little bit petty. When I worked for the church, I did resignations, and like I don't think I've talked about that at all tonight, but I processed name removal letters, and I would read people's letters. That was our job. We had to read the whole letter. And I know that the church, like, that's the one thing that really scares them. Besides the idea of them having to pay taxes. I know they're terrified of having to pay taxes. But I also know that the only thing that really gets them shaking in their boots is when people remove their names. They actually would have us track the trends of why people were leaving. So if we noticed that a lot of people were mentioning Denver Snuffer or Sam Young in their letters, we were supposed to be tracking that and kind of reporting back to our upper management, like supervisor and manager, to say like, hey, these are the reasons people are leaving. So I felt like I could do more work by leaving and kind of adding to those numbers of people who have fully left, because I know that's the only thing the church responds to, right? The exclusion policy, once they implemented that, confidential records halted all work after that exclusion policy was announced because of how many people removed their names. They halted all work, and for a couple of weeks, all they did was process name removal letters. All other work was not even done.
Wow.
So back in November of 2015, when the new policy of exclusion was leaked, as an addition to the church handbook, and I hope we all know what that is. But after that happened, there were so many requests to have names removed from the records of the church that the church office building was flooded with it, and they had to cease work on every other project in order to handle all of these requests.
And I could be wrong on the timing, because it might have been when they reversed the policy, a bunch of people removed their names. I don't remember, but I do know that something to do with the exclusion policy, either when it was implemented or when it was reversed. They had so many name removal requests, they halted all of their work and only did name removals for a couple of weeks. And that, to me, is significant, right? It's a huge pattern. It's something. It was a very clear message to the leaders. So if to answer your question, Landon, like, it's okay if you stay on the records. It's okay if you remove your name. If you're wanting if you're waiting for like a meaningful time to do it, the next time the church does something insane, you can join the other people who undoubtedly are also removing their names. And the church pays attention to that. And it's one of the only things that drives change. It's really unfortunate that it has to get to that point, but I know that it drives change.
And we know that policy was reversed 3.5 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kate and RFM.
Of course.
Appreciate it. Bill, thank you.
Thanks for calling, Landon.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling. Yeah, and I would never ever judge anybody. Sometimes people get really hard line on that and say you need to take your name off the records of the church, and I go, no, I really don't, because I look at it a different way than other people do, and I don't judge people who take their name off. I think they're both completely legitimate choices for a person to make.
I completely agree. Yeah.
All right, and then our last. We got 2 more people down below. If we don't mind. By the way, this will be the last 2, so no necessary. I'll take the banner off the screen.
Okay.
So Exmo Joe, you normally call Mormonism After Dark, but here you are for Mormonism Live, wanting to talk about this conversation about the things that go on in the shadows of the church. What are your thoughts, Exmo Joe?
I just wanted to say, Kate, I love your work. I've been following you for years. I'm so excited that you're making it from a failed filmmaker to a succeeding short film filmmaker. I'm proud of you for doing this. The film definitely needs to be made. I've been, we've recently friended on Facebook. I've followed you on Twitter for years. But you're You're welcome. I want to let you know, if you need any support, any help with like especially with post-production, don't be afraid to ask. I'm here to help you. I want to charge you anything. I want to let you know I'm available to you if you need any kind of help at all. So I just think that your message really needs to be made.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I will hit you up as time goes on, and please message me so that I sometimes I lose track of who's who. So please message me on one of the platforms, and I'd love to connect.
Cool. I'm Joe Rollins. You'll see my name.
Joe Rollins, right?
I'm very public.
Cool. Very cool. Well, thanks for calling in, and it's so fun to like connect with somebody who's followed for so long. I feel like sometimes I see a lot of the negativity and hate from like some of the bad side of the internet, and so it's really fun to connect with people who get it and who understand. So thank you.
Yeah, Joe, thanks so much for calling in. That's very nice of you. Very nice of you. Although it does make me immediately suspicious now.
I did also want to just take a moment to rub in. Oh, what's that I have here? Well, it's my excommunication letter, and just wanted it always has to make an appearance. Hell yeah, baby. Go apostasy. Go for apostasy, bitches. It's the best.
Good
the Cora
job.
horse will always win.
Take it easy, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Take it easy, man.
All right, and Tim, you'll be our last guest.
Tim's going to call it. Or is this? It's not Tim Rathbone. It's Tim S.
No. This is Tim S. And I've already ended the phone line.
That's okay. I just wanted to ask something here because there was a really important. Actually, let's just take Tim. Then I'll bring this up, and then we'll close out.
Sounds good. All right. So Tim, you are on. Yep, you've got yourself unmuted. What do you want to say, my friend?
I was just curious if you ever saw maybe some like reports of anybody's social media stuff. When I was a programmer at the church in the early 2010s, I was over in the family search area, but we sometimes had connections or trainings with other people. And in like 2010, 2012, I was talking with a guy, and he showed me what they were doing with the Twitter Firehose API, where they would gather thousands upon thousands of tweets, real time, group them together under sentiment analysis, kind of stuff to present real time feedback to general authorities that had spoken in general conference.
No way.
Yeah, it was really impressive technical work. Like, this is over 10 years ago, though, right?
You mean as they're speaking in general conference, they're getting live feedback on how many people they're putting to sleep?
Well, they would give it to them like an hour later if they were willing to, interested in seeing the feedback. But yeah, but like the way in which they were automatically collecting and organizing this information was really impressive back then. And there was a mention earlier of the social listening group, but I don't know. Did you ever see your boss holding any kind of report or anything like that might show that they were applying this to automatically collecting information about apostasy conversations?
I never saw anything like that, but it would not surprise me. My guess is that would be a completely different department, because it sounds very technical, kind of like you were saying, at least in the sense that like my boss wouldn't know how to like run an algorithm to do that. I don't even know how you would do something like that. That's how like not tech savvy I am. But that absolutely does not surprise me, and it wouldn't surprise me if they have kind of accelerated those efforts. The church cares a lot about its PR, and I even said this to RFM earlier today. I think the reason they changed the name of the church or kind of emphasized the full name is directly because of Mormon Stories. I remember after they announced it, I was working for the church, and I was driving down I-15, and I saw the Mormon Stories billboard, and I just said, oh my gosh, like, of course, that's why they're changing the name. Like, they want to separate, like, they don't want people Googling the church and finding the Mormon Stories podcast. They care so much, and they pay Google a lot of money. Someone on my mission, somebody who worked for the church came and spoke to my mission, and he said, you would be shocked at how much money the church pays Google to find out what people are Googling about the church, what people are finding. And he's like, you can pay Google a lot of money to find out what you want to know. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're investing money in stuff like that.
Wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate the answer. And thanks for the great conversation.
Of course. Thanks for calling, Tim.
All right, that's it, my friend. That's all the calls and folks in studio.
One
Good.
last thing that I want to ask you, because we've covered everything that we've talked about, plus some tonight, is that you had an insight that I thought was really interesting, that it struck you at some point during church employment, that leaving the church was much more difficult than returning, and that was impactful to you.
Yeah, so I was reading a lot of name removal letters, and I had to read every word, right? And I saw like the heartbreak that people were going through, and I saw the pain in those letters, and I had to kind of confront these questions of, okay, are these people bad people? These people who are clearly in a lot of pain, who are making the agonizing decision to leave, do I think they're all evil? Like, I read probably 1,000 letters or more the whole time I was there. And so I had to either believe, like keep believing that all of these people who were just in pain were evil people, or I had to shift my worldview. And my worldview shifted, and I thought, you know what? I don't think that these people are bad people for leaving. And I also kind of, it's so interesting, like you're saying, RFM, like I would process all these name removals, but in the same day, I would also process readmissions. So people who removed their names and then would come back. And I remember thinking, like, I would be processing all these name removals, right? Where like supposedly this person's damned to hell. They're lost, you know? But then I would switch right to processing a readmission where someone came back and was baptized and now they're in good standing, you know? And I just think it's really, yeah, it really impacted me where I was like, okay, why is the church even the middleman? If it's this easy to come back, like if you just wait a year and you can be rebaptized, is it really that big of a deal in the first place to remove your name? And I just came to the conclusion that it wasn't, and that we didn't need a middleman, because like if you can just come in and come, and if you can leave and come back and leave and come back, like the church, there's really no limit. I only saw one time a limit on like someone being able to come back, but he had been excommunicated like 12 times or something like that. And Thomas S. Monson was finally just like, the Lord will deal with him. We can't bring him back. Like he's had too many chances. But
I
like,
know Jesus may have said 7 times 70, but I think he was exaggerating.
yeah, exactly. And Thomas S. Monson was just like, no, like the Lord will deal with it. But I mean, he was an old guy too, whoever it was. He'd just been excommunicated so many times. It was like such a pain at that point that they were like, no, like he's done. But yeah, you can come back as many times as you want. So I just started thinking, I don't think there's a reason to have this middleman. And I don't think the church is as in charge of our salvation as we think.
Very good.
I'll just note the most people we've had watching the show tonight. By the way, this show has gotten a high number of viewers compared to other shows with the live viewership. The highest we've gotten is just in the last few minutes. We've been at 1405, 1406. Thank you to everyone who has hung on through the entire.
Yeah, thank you.
I think this show has been groundbreaking. I will say one more time, we deeply need your help to be able to continue this show and to keep doing this week after week. Please consider being a donor. For those who do donate, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Please go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, just a few bucks. There were lots of donations that did come in tonight, RFM. I want to thank every one of you that did that. Thank you so much. There were several super chats. We did put those up on the screen. Thank you very much. Please, mormonismlive.org, click the donate button so that we can keep putting things out there to shine a light on the things that go on within Mormon history, doctrine, and things like this where the church is doing stuff that it really shouldn't be doing. Anyway.
You want to hear something funny?
Please.
Something funny is that this is live. And so I don't know, about 2 hours ago, I accidentally cut myself. I gave myself kind of a paper cut and it started bleeding. And then I couldn't do anything because I'm kind of stuck here because we're doing a live show and I got nothing. There's nothing around. So I took a Post-it. Okay.
Oh, nice.
So there's a Post-it. This is what the hand looks like.
That's a bad one.
Holy cow.
It isn't. That's just blood. And I'm trying to wipe it off, with one finger and then put it on the Post-it. This is a heck of a crime scene. They'd be able to pick me up immediately with these fingerprints. But what I wanted to say is the thought that came to me, Kate, was, you have such courage. And I want to comment on that because what you're doing is not insignificant. To come out here publicly and talk about your time working for a super secret organization in the LDS Church. So I want to note that, appreciate it, and thank you so much for coming on, and wish you the best of luck in all your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me too. This has been a great experience. Again, this is my first time ever publicly talking on somebody's platform about this. So thank you. You're both just amazing. I'm grateful for the work that you do, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Please donate to Bill and RFM so they can keep this important work going and validate all of your experiences, because nobody else is doing this work. There's obviously there's like the Exmo community, but like this is the place to go if you want to be validated and know that you're not crazy and that your experiences are valid.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Bill, for all the tech support and everything else. Thank you again, Kate. Thanks, everybody. Please join us again next Wednesday, 6:20 p.m. for another episode of Mormonism Live. Good night, everyone.
Good night.